And thank you for joining us for today's council work session. We'll start off with roll call. Connie, please.
Bates.
Here.
Mangum.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Paulson.
Here.
Satterfield.
Here.
Swanson.
Here.
Dahlquist.
Here. Well, our second agenda item is Golf Advisory Committee update. Representatives from the Golf Advisory Committee who are here will discuss the committee's goals and projects as well as council's policies and expectations. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council, and Butler Parks and Recreation Director. I'm joined at the table here with DJ Mills. He's the chair of our Golf Advisory Committee, and Greg Albright from For Golf. Other committee members are Danielle Mabey, who's our vice chair, Del Mark, Bailey Iguchi, Anthony Rinaldo, and then Greg's also a member of our committee. We also have some representatives that join us from month to month, which is Gerald Myler and Brian Sprague. We'd also like to thank Councilwoman Stacy Satterfield, who's our representative for this at least 2-year period. And then this group's really active in working with our concessionaire about conditions of the golf course and things we can do to make it better. So I'll let DJ and Greg finish off the presentation.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, City Council. On behalf of the committee, we want to thank you very much for your current and past support. Recently, we've been working with Rainbird software improvements at the irrigation efficiencies at Riverside. We've also this winter the Parks Department removed 30 trees at both courses through the Urban Forestry Grant that allowed them to focus on the golf course, which is awesome. I mentioned last year, but we've had some different faces. So when it comes with trees, we love the shade. The problem is it hurts the turf health. So the trees, with their root system, they're actually much better at grass when extracting nutrients and water, and they get blocked out, and it blocks the grass from sunshine. So it's actually a very big movement in the golf industry right now to be removing trees out of golf courses. In fact, this week we have the PGA Championship at a course in Pennsylvania called the, I always pronounce it wrong, but Arno Mink, and they've done an extensive tree removal. A couple years ago, there was another course called Oakmont that did, hundreds and hundreds of trees. So that may sound counterintuitive to the untrained ear, but that is kind of the idea behind why there has been tree removal happening at the golf course. Additionally, we are super excited with the new Connections Credit Union Clubhouse project. We love and appreciate the support about having the building open next season. We will be working with Ann to choose the best simulator for the facility so we can provide that year-round golf experience to have a golf simulator over at that clubhouse. And that has created challenges for Golf to operate Riverside this year, as you may be aware, with the with the parking situation. So we appreciate For Golf very much for having kind of makeshift facilities for this year. I'll let Greg talk about the play report.
Hi, Mayor and City Council. I'm Greg Albright with For Golf. I won't bore you a bunch with these numbers here, but some of our rounds for 2025, we did 84,113. To give you an example, from 2024 to 2025, we had an increase of about 13% in sales, and we had an increase of 10% in rounds of golf. Passes, last year we did 969 passes. I think that's the most passes we've ever sold. Our tournament participation has been really good. We just had our men's opening day. We had roughly 90 guys playing that. We had, I think, 160 sign up. We've got leagues going all week long. We have a ladies league on Tuesday night. We have a couples league that's on Wednesday night, and then we have men's league on Thursday night, and they're all well represented. On Monday, we have a senior league that alternates between both golf courses, and that's seeing record participation too. We've got about 125 guys playing in that each Monday, rotating. We provide the golf course for both high school and ISU to practice and to play. Some of the passes that we offer, in 2019 we developed a family pass, we developed a senior combination pass. We still do our discount play, that's Monday through Thursday, 1 to 5. I send out the email marketing club informing the golfers if they've opted into that of upcoming events, tournaments, league play and stuff like that if they want to participate in that. We are part of Golf Now, and we use Golf Now, and it's a search engine, it's an online tee time service. But the reason that we went with them is sometimes we'll have golfers make tee times and they won't show up. And so this gave me some recourse. And so if you've ever made an online tee time, it's going to ask for some financial information. We don't charge for that, but it does give me recourse if I have people habitually not showing up for their tee times. And I have yet to charge anybody, but I know that it's worked. So that's been beneficial. We partner with Channel 6. We do some advertising during the US Open Golf Tournament. And then our Youth on Course program, where junior golfers, through the Idaho Golf Association, they can pay for a membership. I believe it went up, and I think it's $60 now. They are given a card with a number, and they sign into the pro shop. And what that gives them is a reduced green fees of $5. That's all they're responsible, whether they play 9 holes or 18 holes. The Youth on Course Foundation, they partnered with Bank of America, and they supplement those rounds of golf another $7. And to give you an idea, we've been doing it for probably 5 years or so, but in 2024, I was looking at the numbers, we did 3,000 junior rounds that year. Last year, we did 2,500 rounds with the kids. So it's working really well. So we still offer the season passes for them, but I'm finding a lot of kids that are taking advantage of this Youth on Course.
In regards to future golf course needs, we're obviously aware that there's budget restraints. We're aware that the city has many, many needs across many services, all competing for the same pot. But in the future, irrigation infrastructure replacement is kind of like our next big need. Highland and Riverside infrastructure has been in place, piping, wiring, of the delivery of the water has been in place since the 80s and 90s, and the concessionaire and city are both managing breakage and wear issues, ongoing throughout this season. And this, despite the fact that the system is performing well for its age, it would be prudent for us to plan for a replacement of that in the long term. And with this recent boom in golf, that comes a boon in revenue for us. And so we would just urge the thought of maybe starting to put away some of that so that we could address the irrigation. I think we were super, super fortunate to have a corporate citizen help us. I think you're gonna have a hard time having someone put their plaque on our sprinkler heads to help sponsor that. And so I think that is going to have to come more from city rather than a corporate sponsorship in the future. Also, cart path repairs and asphalt replacement is something that's coming up with wear, and then we're going to continue to assess trees and potential forestry removal at the golf courses as well. So in conclusion, we're obviously excited and grateful that we were able to get the clubhouse moving forward. Don't want to sound ungrateful by bringing up the irrigation. I get it, that's another expensive thing. It's just we are just trying to be forthcoming in what needs to be happening at the golf course. And on behalf of myself and the rest of the committee, we want to express our sincere thanks. Do you have any questions for us?
Yes, got a question.
So I'm glad you brought up irrigation, and I have a few questions about it. Is Highland in more need than Riverside?
It's the older irrigation system, yes. And when we took over, we've been in business 22 years, it was outdated even then. So we've done our best at trying to keep it alive, both with irrigation lines, with satellites, with heads, but it's quite the maintenance, and we've been doing that since the beginning.
What's the normal lifespan?
I think they were saying around 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
And I believe it was put in the 80s when I was a junior golfer up there. I remember when they were installing it. So I think it was in the 80s.
And with our SIP, our golf SIP, we are all of those funds that we took all of it for the clubhouse, correct? But how much do you anticipate we can add to that each year?
So what I'm trying to do is take the capital improvement fees, so golfers pay $1 per round that goes into that. So all that money's dropping in there. I think it was about $65,000 last year. And then what I'm trying to do is amend, there's $200K that goes into the Fund 4 in the Recreation Fund, which also offsets the expenditures. There is a small budget for golf in Fund 4. And then what I've been doing is dropping any money above that 200 back into the CIP fund, which is where we ended up with a couple $100,000 for the golf clubhouse.
And any idea, have we done any kind of estimation on what the dollar cost would be at Highland?
I think it depends on how extensive it is. I know Pinecrest and Idle Falls just did a irrigation renovation here just a couple of years ago, and I think that they budgeted about $3 million for that. I don't know if they completely replaced everything.
Wasn't it like 1.5 per 9? Isn't
It
that
could-
what we
it
heard?
could- it
I
could
thought,
have been.
yeah.
Yeah, I just remember 3 million total. So they're not expensive. And I know Juniper Hills is right now in the process of replacing, I don't know if it's just 9 holes of their irrigation system, but they're in the process of that on their back 9.
We can get
So-
some current bids for you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So are we removing any healthy trees or are they only sick ones?
You know, and the Parks Department, I bet you they removed at least 30 trees. There was some out at Riverside. They were planted too close together, really. And now because they're so big, kind of like what DJ was saying, it's difficult to grow grass and shade. And so they did remove some of those and thinned out some of that area. A lot of them has been the dead tree, though. We had that pine beetle come through. We probably lost at least 30 trees between both golf courses that we needed to get out of there. And unfortunately, some of them were in locations that really added to the design of that particular hole. So now we actually probably need to try to put a couple trees just to kind of give us that design back again, since we lost those.
Got it, thank you.
All right. Okay, well, thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 3 is Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee update. Representatives from the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee will discuss the committee's goals and projects as well as council's policies and expectations. Welcome.
Just take over?
Yep.
You're not gonna help me, huh?
first. No,
Okay.
you got this.
Good morning, Mayor and council members.
And if you
I'm
don't
Tanya
mind,
Wilkes.
okay, sorry, you're introducing yourself. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm Tanya Wilkes. I'm the chair of the Parks and Rec Board. I also work for Pocatello School District 25 as the district athletic director. Our board members are Darren Black, Dr. Grace Jory, Lisa Wilmore, Anastasia Hershey, Alexis Jorgensen, who's our vice chair, Amy Commodore, and Ed Giggly. Yep. Did I say it right? William Schmier. And then we are actually looking for someone to be on our board for the golf seat vacancy right now. And then our board is Stacy Satterfield. Thank you for being our advisory. Just real quick, general board information. We meet about 6 times throughout the year, usually on the even months on Thursday, and we have a really good turnout with our board members, very active and very involved in the community as well. They bring some good key ideas and information. Our key projects and issues that the board has been involved in and provided input on since our last annual presentation. First off was the identifying the needed park system. We've had a lot of parks that just need some improvements. We feel that some good momentum has been attained on several projects there with replacements, including Wastello and Freckleton. Playgrounds replacement underway are coming later this year are Scardino, Alameda, Legacy, and Empire. So those are well needed and they definitely are expensive, but they're used frequently. And so that's been one of our big desires to keep that update on that. Work with community groups such as the Neighborhood Association, United Way, and LDS. We're still ongoing partners. And with Pocatello School District 25, I know that recently you've just agreed with the MOU that we've put in place. It's always been there, but it's good to have that written. And with our new project with our tennis courts coming up this summer, so 6 new tennis courts, and we have a great partnership there where the city will be able to manage that in the summer, and we can manage it during the school year. So this is really good things. Also, I wanted just to give a shout out with a couple new programs and opportunities this summer that we haven't had in the past. We haven't had skateboard camps and things like that. Lacrosse is bringing their big state tournament to Pocatello, actually this weekend, I think, and they're using the OK Ward Park and then Century High School turf field as part of that. So it's a great partnership to just bring these programs and great opportunities for the community, that money into our community. So this is awesome. The other things is our new connections with Connections Credit Union, the clubhouse. If any of you come to that groundbreaking, that was pretty awesome. I think we're very lucky that we identified that that building needed to come down. So we're timely on that. Improvements made at the cemeteries, including the plating process, and almost completed at Restlawn Cemetery. Rebranding the signage is a big improvement. If you haven't noticed that in the parks, they're awesome. They're gorgeous. Tree replacement and trimming as well. All over Pocatello, this grant has been huge for the department. City staff keeps us looped in on the budgetary issues and staffing. I know we steal from each other quite a bit, from school district to Parks and Rec.
We do.
As a note of emphasis regarding provision and programs and services, the Parks and Rec's ability to locate, attract, and hire and retain qualified seasonal staff continues to be very difficult. We recognize the council's support in making increases to wages and appreciate their efforts. It really is hard to maintain what we can pay them and not be in poverty. Other projects of need on our radar is continued playground replacement, connection and maintenance of the greenway trails, which have improved quite a bit in the last year as well, parking lot improvements, and Hallowell score booth replacement. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your continuous showing up to events and so forth. On behalf of the Parks and Rec Board and department staff, we'd like to thank Mayor Dahlquist and the city council members for your continued support, and we are very appreciative of the council's continued commitments that have allowed Parks and Rec to accomplish what it has the past year. It's provided the valuable service and programs to the community, and I just want to give a really big shout out to Ann. I mean, working with her in the last few years have been just phenomenal, and things that we can bring to the community and to this community in itself with youth sports and adult sports. So I appreciate that.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yes.
You brought up Hallowell. Can you speak a little bit more on what the status is, what the plans are? I haven't heard about this. Do you mind just going a little more in depth on that?
Sure, so we made, my very first year, my first task was to take care of some safety concerns at Hallowell baseball field. And some of you may remember, we put about $100,000 into Hallowell. We replaced the ceiling of the dugouts, redid the railings, made every safety concern we could address. The one item that is left is the concession stand is at the bottom, and then above is the score booth. I'm leery as the floor gets a little more squishy, that at some point we're gonna have to replace that. I am currently looking kind of for some corporate sponsorship, and I'm working on kind of what that would look like and what the costs would be. I should have those costs here in the next week or so. It's been on my radar, it just hasn't snuck to the top yet, along with a lot of deferred maintenance issues, but I just know that at some point we're gonna have to take a look at that, so.
Okay, thanks.
I had some feedback yesterday, not to sidetrack too much, but it was Parks and Rec, but the pickleball courts at Ross Park, and I think you told me about this, Ann, earlier, that when they were finally being surfaced, there was a rainstorm or hailstorm or something. And that still got all the dimples on the surface. Are there any plans to fix that, or?
No, the surface is in good playable condition. I think the difference that most people see is that this is an outdoor court, which means it's never pristine and looking like brand new paint anymore as they see on indoor courts. There's dust blowing all the time. We had the vendor come out this fall and take a look at it to verify that it was in good condition. He brought some product that matched, and we sealed. So as you pour the concrete posts in, that's concrete and the rest is asphalt, and as the temperature swings, you get some separation there. So he taught us how to seal those holes to make sure we didn't get any water or moisture under those. But no, overall, the surface is in great condition given the environment we live in.
It's maybe more of an aesthetic kind of thing when you look at those and being outdoor kind of thing.
They're in good condition for what we have, and I think they'll live several more years.
And they're used frequently. Never been out there.
That's what I understand.
Yep.
well used.
So, yeah, and the new signs are sharp. I've had lots of positive feedback on the new park signs.
The other thing I wanted to mention, because I know Christine's here, is that urban forestry grant has changed the game for our department in the last 2 years. We knew we were behind on trees, but we were really behind on trees. We have literally had those crews out there, 2 separate crews out there, different businesses, working nonstop to get our tree condition in better shape. So, I mean, kudos to her. That's a massive grant. Those are gifts. So I just wanted to make sure she got some credit.
Yeah, that's been great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Pocatello America 250 Ad Hoc Committee Update. Representatives or representative from the Pocatello America 250 Ad Hoc Committee will be in attendance to discuss the committee's goals and projects for the July 3rd, 2026 time capsule dedication event. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Good morning. This feels very strange this morning, sitting on this side of the dais after 8 years of sitting up
Yes,
there.
I'm
but
sure.
Let this thing load and we'll get this going.
I like your shirt.
Thank you. This was the first one distributed by the treasurer. My wife and I each got one before the general distribution was. Welcome, I'm Rick Cheatham. Was one of you a year ago or a few months ago. What I'm here to talk about today, I'm sure everyone is aware of the America 250 celebration. It's the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. It happened on July 4th, that's why we have the holiday that day. The committee, I started talking to Mayor Bladd almost a year ago about what was happening here. The logo you see was distributed by the treasurer's office at the state level to every city that wanted to involve a local personal America 250 program. But it's been pretty successful so far. Our committee members, I chair this, Kathleen Lewis, Annie Mendoza, Crystal Panic, Rachel Bridges, J.D. Hansen, Jacob Huskinson, and Michael Thiel are committee members. And we've had support from city staff of Ann Nichols and Wendy Prather. I talked to the mayor last summer about doing something with this program. We really started this in March of 2025. It started right at the end of the legislative session. The legislature appropriated $250,000 to celebrate the anniversary. And they passed around a sign-up sheet. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun, so I signed it. Without knowing what I was getting into, but we've proceeded from there. When that happened, the constitutional officers at the state all jumped on board big time with this program to promote it across the entire state. But the one who really took the horns on this thing is Julie Ellsworth, our state treasurer. Julie's office has a couple of people. This is basically what they do now. Julie, it turns out, is incredibly creative and quite a seamstress. The Idaho Potato Commission has these Spuddy Buddies. You may have seen them. They're just they look like a potato with arms and legs and a face on them. She took those from the Potato Commission and created the Revolutionary Spuds. And there are now 15 of those that are going all across the state. And they all have appropriate names for potatoes, like George and Martha Washingtater and Spud Revere and Martha Tot Strong. There are a lot of different names that she's given these. She actually created these at her own home. She told me the first day I met with her about this that when she was little, she had 7 siblings and didn't get along with all of them real well. So her mother banished her to the basement with a sewing machine, and she learned to sew. So she personally sewed all the costumes and designed everything for every one of these spuds. I have Spud Revere living in my garage right now. I guess I should say stable because he's on a horse. But we've done a lot with these things throughout the year. Another piece of this is getting people to sign a scroll that is a simulation of the Declaration of Independence signatures. We were the first group to turn in a scroll. We got about 2,000 signatures on the first scroll, and it's now hanging at the Capitol from the top of the rotunda all the way down to the first floor. But that's part of what's going on. After this happened and we started doing all of the celebration, I talked to Mayor Blatt about wanting to do something here. And what I want to do, and we're working on, is a 50-year time capsule. It'll take a snapshot of today from various organizations and from the city and put it in a time capsule that won't be opened until July 3rd, 2076. And that has presented some unique struggles that we're working our way through right now. If you think back, it would have been, 1976 when something like this could have been done. And technology has changed a lot in that time period. Thumb drives didn't exist then. We were using floppies that were 12 inches in mainframe computers. How you store the data and how you preserve the records is quite an event. Since I got elected to the legislature, I've been involved heavily in Power County, and they opened a time capsule over there that had been stored for 25 years. And when they opened it, they discovered a VHS tape that had been recorded, and nobody had a VHS player to play it on. So they finally found someone that had one in a garage, and they managed to view that and transfer the video to something more contemporary. But we're looking at something similar. One of my concerns with putting a time capsule together is, what if something happens to the physical stuff that is inside the time capsule? So we're working with Moat IT, with Ali Khan, to find a way to store this in the cloud and find a way to store it so that in 50 years it will still be relevant and seen in case something happens to the physical stuff that we put inside our time capsule. I met last week, Stacy was there, with the downtown merchants. At least a small group representation of the downtown merchants. And we're working with them. We want to do this at the Marshall Public Library. When Christine first applied for the grant for this, we were proposing to do this at the Brady Chapel. But after further consideration, there are some problems with storing something underground like that, and whether or not a capsule could survive environmental conditions of water and fertilizer and whatever else might penetrate it. So right now, we're working with the Marshall Public Library to store the capsule there above ground so we won't have those kind of concerns. It should help to enable our physical contents of the time capsule to survive better. I've also discovered in researching that one of the problems with ordinary paper is it deteriorates, and as it does, it degasses and continues to deteriorate and deteriorate other things in close proximity. So we're planning to store things so that we can preserve it as much as we can. Downtown merchants are very excited about this. They would like to do a whole event that day. We picked July 3rd for a couple of reasons. One is Chubbuck is doing their celebration July 1st. July 4th, of course, is the annual celebration of the holiday with the parade and with events at the wellness complex and the fireworks show. The county is using their $2,500 grant for a concert with ISU up there. So July 3rd is also the anniversary date of Idaho becoming a state. So we're going to coordinate hours with that day at 5 o'clock at the Marshall Public Library and close Garfield Street, probably bring in food trucks and try and have a community celebration of this event. One of our committee members did something really unique. This town contains a lot of talent. And I want to play a song for you. And this was written and performed by one of our community members.
Long before the steel rails hum their song across the land, Chief Pocatello walked these valleys with his people hand in hand. legacy still whispers in the partners generation. King settlers, dreamers, builders, carving futures from the dust, raising homes beside the mountains with resilience, hope, and trust. The deep blue rose in sandstone like a promise standing tall, and the banner courthouse follow, watching over one and all. Pocatello, gay city of the West, your stories weave together like the eagles woven nest. For America 250, we remember where we've been, and we honor every chapter as a new one now begins. Governor Brady's voice of progress carried far across the state, down in Idaho with purpose toward a bold and brighter fate. And the Marshall Public Library opened doors to every mind. Oh, where in Idaho State University, knowledge and treasure we still find, from the chief hitters glowing lights to the chapel built in grace. Every landmark holds a heartbeat of this proud and sacred place. Generations stand together, from neon to silver, for the love of Pocatello and the history we share. Pocatello, great city of the West, your story weave together like the eagles woven nest. For America 250, we remember where we've been, and we honor every chapter as a new one now begins.
Wow, gave me goosebumps.
It does, yeah, I've heard it a
Hallelujah.
dozen times.
Yeah.
It does every time.
Uh-huh.
Stacy's over here keeping music as she did the first time she heard it. But it's amazing that this kind of talent exists in our community. I was impressed. He did that a solo job with the help of AI. And amazing song. The state has a song that they wrote for America 250. This kicks its butt.
Wow.
This is way better song than
This
what
should
the
be in
state
the
has.
top 40 by now.
I'm going to
Or
forward this.
America's top 40.
We're gonna, there you go. Gonna forward this to the treasurer's office. I wanted you all to hear it before I did that, because I think it'll probably get on their website. We've got a lot of pictures that we've taken at events for what we've done here to promote America 250 in the last year, and a lot of those are on the state's website. So I think this will make it too, but it's quite an event. Oops. Michael also, just to show his talent, also created a page we're gonna use in a coloring contest. And that's our Buddy replicas. What we wanna do is put this together, and then the youthful winner of the best coloring contest, we'll put that in the time capsule. So it'll be preserved for the next 50 years. So we got lots of things going on. The committee meets again next Wednesday. I made them wait until the day after the election before we have our next meeting, but we've got a lot happening. We're still pulling details together, but we hope you can all attend with us when this event happens on July 3rd at 5 o'clock, and be at the Marshall Public Library and help us celebrate what we're doing with the America 250 program. With that, I stand for questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sure.
can you describe or a few of the things that are planning to go into the time capsule besides the coloring page?
Right now, that's indeterminate, Ann. We have a cardboard box in Wendy's, I don't know if Wendy's here. We have a cardboard box in Wendy's desk, and I'm asking people to gather stuff and put it in the box. I don't know how big a time capsule to make yet. Partner Steel, I met with Jaime Elgato, and they're going to participate. They're going to manufacture this for us to buy a commercial time capsule of the size that I think we're going to need, like about the size of a Samsonite briefcase or something. It's $2,000. Jaime says they will participate. Don't have a final cost yet, but we're gathering stuff and putting in there. I've talked to Ian over at the Journal. They're talking about a commemorative edition. We want a copy of that in there. So far, we have a few things that we have collected, but we're still in the process of putting it together. Ann brought some stuff over and put it in to commemorate the golf clubhouse that's going on, the other things that are happening in Parks and Rec in our community. I've asked the downtown merchants to produce something that kind of videos where we're at with our downtown right now, especially that decadent skateboard building over there, because that's the oldest wooden structure that still survives in the city of Pocatello. And they said they will put it together. Michael currently is working with a videographer to do a video of the city and put this song behind it to pull that all together in a video. But we don't have, I mean, I would love if you have ideas, bring stuff to us, drop it off at Wendy's office. Let's go through and let's record where we are today. Because not many of us, maybe Hayden, will be around in 50 years.
Oh, no. Hold on, hold on.
I don't want to light in 50 years.
I don't know whether, I'm not gonna be there, I'm pretty sure. But if you have ideas or things that you think are important to our community that we can leave as a record for the next 50 years. Because I look back 50 years where we were in 1975, and this town's come a long way, and we got a long way to go. So,
Is there some suggested criteria that the committee's developed, or is it just sort of like open and then we'll see what
yeah,
we can
we'll
do?
see what everybody brings to us, and once we get an idea of how much stuff and how big it is, then we'll figure out how big we need to make this time capsule and try and keep as much as we can. Obviously, we can't put huge things in there. The Marshall Public Library has a space and a cabinet. There's a gap between a couple of cabinets, and it would be perfect to slide something into. But we don't know exactly where to put it. One of my other concerns is I want a lock on this thing so that somebody can't get in and fool with it in 30 years. But I want to store the key to this thing someplace else so that it wouldn't tempt anyone to see what's in there. I talked about Mode IT and the help that they've given us. One of the things I want to do is create a bronze or brass plate that goes on or inside the time capsule. So when they open it, it will have the instructions about how you get that virtual stuff back. But we're working on it. It's been an exciting thing, and we'd love to have your help. If you have ideas about things that need to be retained, bring them in, get them to Wendy Prather, and we'll start sorting through that stuff and figuring it out.
Has ISU
Yes.
been, okay.
You know,
and the
they're in their
school district?
125 right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
And I've talked to Robert Wagner, and Michael's talked to Robert Wagner, the president, and they're bringing us some stuff to put in there. We've talked to the school district.
Good.
I've talked to the county. So, what other kinds of events and things that we have. We just want to put save as much as we can.
Sure.
Couple things. When we were in our meeting, they brought up a great idea of taking pictures of all the murals downtown and putting them in the capsule. Who knows if they would, be there at that point. And then during your festivities, are you going to have that song performed?
Oh, it won't be performed, but it will be played.
It'll be played.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Oh, it should be performed.
We do have a singer who has volunteered to perform the state song, but this will dwarf that performance. This song is so pertinent to our community.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. Rick, does your group coordinate much with that? Just serve 250,000 acts of service?
That's a state program, so no. Getting this, our job is the time capsule.
Yeah.
And we haven't had any active interaction with the 250,000 acts of service, no.
Okay. Yeah, no worries if not, but I know they're, kind of commemorating the anniversary themselves with that act of service.
I was in Boise 2 weeks ago and talked to the treasurer, and they're over 200,000 so far
Yeah.
in that project. So now that fairer weather is here, why they're expecting to far exceed the
Yeah, I'm
250,000.
sure they'll meet that way ahead of time.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, awesome
Thank
stuff.
you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, agenda item 5 is proposed June fiscal year 2026 budget amendments. Finance Department staff will be in attendance to present council detailed information on proposed FY '26 June budget amendments for the public hearing to be held on June 4th, 2026. Welcome, Rich.
Mayor, council, it's good to be with you. Appreciate your time. Rick sharing Mr. Thiel's song is pretty inspiring. I think maybe we'll try budgeting by song. Wouldn't that be fun? It would make it so much
That mean
better.
you're seeing the whole thing?
Sing that budget.
There we go. Before you is the proposed budget amendments. Why do we do this? We do this because we've either received revenue or we want to access resources that were not included in the original budget. This is an internal control, really, that the state statute allows you to control those resources. It doesn't look as large as the regular budgeting process, but it is exactly like the regular budgeting process. We'll have a public hearing and then you will pass an ordinance to do that. And the timeline is in the information that you've received. Most of the items on this list have been before you. We've discussed them. The thing that bubbled up this amendment for June was the bond in the water department. They want to get that paid off, and the sooner we can get that paid off, the more savings we would have in the interest. And then the fire department has received a grant, and they're under some pretty tight, I think, timelines to get that money spent. So we wanted to get this in front of you. So with those two things bubbling up, we just went to all of the departments and said, we're gonna propose a budget amendment. Do you have anything? I can go through every line item if you would like me to, or we could approach this you asking questions, and I'm open to either way. Do you have a preference?
So the list on page 4, that's the main thing
That
we're
is
looking at.
correct. Yep.
Maybe we can just see if there's individual questions or line item questions rather than going through each one.
Okay.
Yes.
I just have a general question since I'm a little bit new to this process. So this represents fiscal year 2026, which ends in September 30th.
Correct.
Correct, okay. So last year when council did the budget for fiscal year 2026, this money hadn't appeared, this
Right.
additional money.
It wasn't
Yeah.
part of the budget
Okay.
that was passed.
So in the interim, we've received grants or other, is this all grants that we've received?
No,
or-
and you can see the revenue source. There were some donations.
Okay,
We are, when it says fund balance, those are funds that we have, but they weren't part of the budget, so we want to access them. We have to open the budget.
okay.
So
I see. So
those are
these
the
might
two
be like
main
re-
reasons why it would happen.
Okay. So if it says fund balance, does that mean that was money in a fund, but it wasn't budgeted for a particular purpose? And now
Correct.
we're wanting to budget it for a
That is
particular
correct.
purpose? Okay,
And a good example of the other one, it's small, but remember talking about the library's 10,000? That is, let's see, where is, so line number 7, and there was another small one, but they received that grant, they want to do some landscaping, so we'll bring that money in, they'll be able to expend it. Without the budget gives them authority to spend, right? Receiving cash does not give you authority to spend. You've got to have it in the budget to have that authority.
all right, thanks.
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, could you explain item number 14, the golf capital improvements and the increase in price on the clubhouse, please?
So that's the money that we're moving from their capital fund up. Remember we talked about it as 700,000. They were short in the bid. That 700,000, that's that's plugging that hole in that bid.
So we had already anticipated this?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I can't remember how many council meetings ago it was. And the reason I bring up the 700,000 is I do believe that's how it was discussed in the meeting. And so maybe having the actual dollar amount, which is just below that, isn't triggering your memory, but yeah, that bid came in high, and so we needed to include an additional 700,000
Okay,
to
got it.
make that project complete.
Got it, thank you.
Yes.
Rich, on the water capacity, Amendment 10. So the 578,000 we're taking from reserves in Fund 37. After the 578,000, do you know what our balance will be in reserves in that fund?
I can tell you that.
Or I guess what our current balance is, I can do the math.
Says that this fund will pay off.
The current balance is 2733. Oh, I didn't bring my calculator.
That's
So it'd
okay.
be
We-
2
Oh, so we have
2
2.7
million,
million in the
we have
reserve.
2.7
Okay.
million in that fund.
All right, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Oh,
see kind
thank
of where
you.
we were at.
Is that close enough for you?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I
I just wanted to
appreciate
see
that,
how
but-
much of a hit of reserves that will be, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
So they'd have 2 left.
Okay, and then on amendment number 2, I just have to ask, with the Crest development payments,
Yeah, what that was
Yeah.
the story goes that the Crest project, the city of Pocatello, like it was on city of Pocatello property, and specifically for the city's, the plans there for the Crest, and it got plugged in. There was a little bit of a disconnect from, before everything changed over a new administration here, but I heard the story out and I agreed with that work that was done. It really was on behalf of the city for that airport improvement.
and so I guess my only question with that, do we anticipate any additional costs, or this is it?
Yeah, I think there's about $6,000 more that will
Okay.
just come out of the mayor's office fund. There were a couple of other smaller bills associated with that, but we won't take that. We won't need an amendment for that.
Perfect.
I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, that there were requests made that we also denied. We went through a list of them and said, okay, these ones make sense, these ones don't. Is that?
Yeah, at first it was that way. We were
Yeah.
thinking we would run all of these through the budget amendment. And then there were those couple of other bills that were still associated with Crest that so at first, but full disclosure, they were, we covered those other two that we weren't sure about.
Okay.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, and I think it's great that we're paying off the water bond to save some interest there, that we've got enough in reserve that we can do that. That's a good thing.
Kudos to Justin,
Yes.
willing to do that.
And I took a tour of our 1.5 gallon new water tank up above Satterfield, and that was very impressive. That's quite the project, and that will be done within 60 days. So that's a great capital improvement for the city that was being paid for in anticipation of capital improvements needed. We had that money on hand. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I think we're on track for a council meeting to get this approved.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, just going into my agenda. It looks like item number 6 is seasonal employee pay structure. Representative from the Parks and Rec Department and Human Resources will tell us about that.
Very good. Thank you for your time today. Introduce, I'm Jay Seedall with Human Resources.
Ann Butler, Parks and Recreation Director. I appreciate Jay being here with me today. I knew that this was a topic that we needed to discuss and that he was going to be fairly new when we had this conversation. So I promised Mayor Blad when I started that I would do everything I could to solve the seasonal pay issue, the seasonal employment issue that we have. I am at wit's end except for pay at this stage. And I know you guys have a lot of asks. I know that you have more expenditures than you have money. But this is something that we need to talk about. Councilman Bates, that is actually the Hallowell score booth right there in that picture. You can see in green.
Yeah.
So here's our structure in the Parks and Recreation Department. And down below in that coral color, that is the number of seasonal employees that we have per summer if they worked full-time hours. So we have been trying to be flexible, so you know that parks number may go up substantially if they're only willing to give us 20 hours a week, or they're only willing to work a couple days a week. So today's focus is really the parks and the cemetery, the labor positions that we so desperately need, which impacts the beautification of our city, which I know this council is very, it's very important to you guys. So you can see on the recreation side at the Ross Park, we have 55 staff members. Those are mostly lifeguards. And then everything in asterisks is our recreation divisions, and those fluctuate depending on the type of programs that they have, okay? When we budget seasonally, so there's a little bit of education here on the front end, is per person in lines 1001 and 1002, we separately budget for every person, me, my staff, every person, their salary and their medical and insurance benefits, right? We do that every year. But in 1003 and 1004, those are buckets of money. So it's really the person's hourly wage. They don't get any benefit at all. So it's just their hourly wage. Parks and Recreation is basically the only department left on the seasonal scale. There are a few positions that fall on the seasonal scale in other departments, but on the whole, the utilities saw that basically we're fighting over the same few seasonal employees every year, and the utilities converted theirs to full-time headcount about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, okay? So really what we're talking about is just their hourly wage. That's the only way that we really can convince someone to come to work for us. In the Parks and Recreation Department, those buckets of money, that 1003 money or 1004 money equates to this. So in parks, it's $336,000, cemetery, $83,000. And you can see throughout there the buckets of money in 1003. The zoo does have a 1004 bucket of money of almost $70,000. Okay, so that's what this is the pot of money that we're talking about increasing or changing. And I asked Jay to come up and explain the difference between seasonal and variable positions. And then I'll explain kind of why these two rules have created the perfect storm for us.
Yeah, and we'll talk about seasonal first, but according to the Fair Labor Standards Act, it allows, if you look at that top bullet under Percy, permits employees to work up to 8 months during the growing season, which for us is typically the April through November timeframe. Working more than 8 months requires a Percy contribution, which Ann does not put in her budget. And then several employees would like to go over the season and then go on to unemployment. We have conflicting rules, if you will, with the Affordable Care Act, where legislation requires employees to be offered insurance benefits if they work over the 6 months. So Percy up to 8, but Affordable Care Act up to 6 months.
Which basically curbs us to 6 months, where we used to have a lot of returning employees that would work the 8 months and then they'd go on unemployment, or they'd go ski, be ski bums or do something else for the winter months, and they'd come back to us. We don't have that type of staff anymore because of the Affordable Care Act merging against Percy. It's 6 months, okay?
So the second half of that is variable, which we don't have as many in the Parks and Rec department, but permits employees to work jobs not related to the growing season, so that April through November timeframe, up to 20 hours per week. There are no Percy requirements, no contributions are required. Working more than 20 hours for 5 months or more means Percy contributions is required for the city to pay for those employees. So again, those are funds that are not budgeted. there are people that would like to work over more than those 20 hours. Again, we butt that up against the Affordable Care Act, where legislation requires employees be offered insurance benefits if they work over up to or 30 and over hours per week. So the seasonal buck of money has never included any of these benefits. So our Ann's struggle is she's really just competing with hourly wage, no other benefits.
So what does that mean for the department? April and May are the most miserable time of the year for us. Absolutely miserable. There's not enough hands to do mowing, trimming, and weeding. A lot of locations you'll see where the gang mowers come through, but we don't have enough bodies to actually trim it, so I think it still looks terrible. You can only mow so much when you don't have enough hands, and sending a gang mower to mow and then get off his mower to go hand mow and trim is futile. So it just doesn't work. Really in the spring and then again in September when we lose everybody to school, we're really reacting to special events and tournaments right now only. And even that can be a struggle. We just don't have enough bodies to do it. It delays when the grass starts growing in April like it did this year. I think my first complaint came in on April 9th. You guys all saw it. That was the earliest it's ever come in, and it's because we just didn't have, the seasons changed weird this year. When we have to refocus some of our staff to mowing, the full-time staff, we don't get irrigation turned on. We don't get to take care of repairs that we need to. We are struggling right now with fertilizing and herbicide application because we just don't have enough bodies to do it because it needed to be done earlier. In the fall, it impacts our holiday light prep and turf repair. The fall's the time to really make headway in your turf repair. And we just don't have the hands to do it. I wanted to talk a little bit about retention. We don't have any retention, which means we have to train everybody that comes in the door, which is difficult. We truly do want everything looking wonderful and great, but right now this is the struggle that we're in. It's not June and July because the kids are out of school and we have plenty of hands at that point. It's getting to June that is the struggle. FTE is full-time employee. These are the type of tasks that our crews are doing. And I put in bold some of their most important tasks in the spring. I won't read them all to you, but I also don't want to downplay getting the restrooms open and ready. That is not a one-day task. That is all over town, making sure that everything's running and functioning, irrigation systems on and repairs made. That is a several-week process for everybody we have. So please, I felt like I was simplifying that, and it's not simple. But those are the type of tasks that our full-time employees are doing. And then I wanted to explain seasonal tasks. Our seasonal crew are really the ones that do all of that, planting flowers, the trimming, the mowing, cleaning pavilions so that when a patron shows up, there's not extra bird stuff there. All the weed removal all over town is done by our seasonal staff. That is not typically done by our full-time staff. So I just kind of wanted to explain kind of the things that they're working on. Adapting. These are the things that we have been trying to do to make this work. We have made flexible schedules. I know how difficult that is on my supervisors. We rely heavily on volunteers. School District 25, we have preached and preached to try to get some of those teachers on board and mix some adults into our crews. We don't pay enough to entice a teacher to come to work in the summer. They enjoy their summers, and we're just not there. We have tried everything we can technology-wise. We used to send a seasonal employee out to open and close the restrooms every morning and every night. We have gone to automated system to lock doors on a timer. A patron can leave the bathroom. If they're in it when it locks, they can leave, but then it locks behind them, and so they can't get stuck. We have modified and made drastic improvements to our irrigation systems. MaxiCom is the system the Parks Department was running, which was state-of-the-art 30 years ago, but it's not today. So the Department of Labor, I've made presentations to the Department of Labor to try to get different groups to come to work. HR's helped us. They go to hiring events and advertising. We are not getting any traction in April and May, absolutely zero. We've outsourced our restroom cleaning because the pay was extremely low and no one would do it. New Day is actually gonna do that, and it's cheaper than what we were paying somebody to do that. So I put staffing agency as a question mark. I have some concerns with this. I feel like if we had the dollars to pay the employee, we would just pay them instead of paying a fee to the staffing agency. Jay's got a little experience in that. We've talked about it. He was pretty leery that that would be a successful solution for us. I think we need to have some thoughtful discussions about how much property the city owns. The numbers I'm gonna show you are actual from the pros. Those are recreation spaces or green spaces. They are not locations that the city owns that we take calls on and have to go clean up. I get random calls every year. I'll give an example. On the corner of Cottage and Hawthorne, there's a 3-foot wide strip that grows weeds. It's along the roadway, right? Nobody wants to clean it up. The neighbors get tired of it, and so we go out and clean it up. It's not a functional park space, but it is owned by the city and something we have to take care of. I think it's worth that discussion. We have grown exponentially, and I'll show you those numbers here in a minute. The other option that we have that maybe we look at is looking at outsourcing some of the different applications that we have that would be very singular to try to help get by in the spring. This is an example of kind of what our ads look like when someone were to apply. This goes at home in a postcard in all kids' backpacks and through the school district. We're not shy about sharing what tasks need to be done there. It is what it is. It's hard work. So I just thought I'd share that. This is an example. I was actually going through some service levels from the past, and Jerry Sepich shared this slide in 2007. He was a former Parks and Rec director, and he was comparing their staffing numbers in 1997 to 2007. As you can see, those numbers are pretty much the same, but the number of ground we're covering is exponentially more. So I took the numbers in the right column from the pros directly to give you some comparison. They didn't call out the beautification areas quite the same as they have in the past, so I just wanted to show you that for comparison purposes. The pro says we are maintaining an acre at $940. Current industry typically falls between $2,000 and $5,000 an acre. So we are behind, but our staffing, our full-time staffing numbers are very similar to what they were in 1997.
And can you quickly explain the hybrids, the 4 hybrids, so everyone understands that?
So the Parks Department funds 2 full-time positions as a hybrid, and the Street Department funds 2 full-time positions. And for 6 months, starting the 1st of April, all 4 hybrids come to the Parks Department. And then 6 months later, I think it's, the beginning of November, they go to the Street Department for the winter. So it works fairly well. There's pros and cons to it for sure, but I think it's a cost-effective approach for us. These are comparisons that I took this spring off the internet for postings and their hourly wage, which would be comparable to things that we have in our Parks and Rec department seasonally. So you can see just a comparison for the pay that's out there. We have to find a way to find a higher skill level or entice someone to leave their job to come work for us for 5 or 6 months. And right now we're not doing that. So I won't go through them, but you can see that we're a little bit behind.
And sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
again, but on Chubbuck, how do they do it? Do they have the same struggle with the students, or do they have a different method for
So
hiring seasonal?
they have 4 full-time employees in their Parks Department, and I think their seasonal staff is like 7 or 8. Last year was the first time ever we were losing returning gang mower drivers to the city of Chubbuck. And I talked to 2 of them, and they both said, if you can't pay over $15 an hour, I can't stay here, because Chubbuck was enticing them to come to work. So this is
Sorry, Ann.
yeah.
I want to note, though, on that, comparing us to Chubbuck, a lot of our facilities and a lot of our recreational amenities Chubbuck takes advantage of. And so it's hard to really kind of compare apples to apples there. For what it's worth.
They don't have quite as much ground to cover as we do, for sure. So this is the current seasonal pay chart. And so really what is in cream there is the majority of the employees. I'll note there, I gave the typical positions. It's not all the positions on the seasonal pay chart, but those are the most common ones. My concern is moving the chart too drastically impacts one place the most that concern me, and that is not the laborers at the cemetery or the parks. It's the fact that we have 50 lifeguards in a PO3. Drastically changing the pay chart has a huge impact for the pool's budget. And I will say that's the one place we don't have a hard time finding staff. It's created a culture of high school kids that really enjoy it. They'll leave other jobs to come work for us for the summer and find new employment. So the $12.30 an hour, it might be slightly low for a life safety issue type position, but it's still fairly competitive. Even though I know they can work at Soda Barn and some of those locations for more pay than that, I know that we've created an environment they enjoy. We also have a lot more returners in that, so they are moving steps where a lot of our other ones start back at the beginning. Just as a note, we started all of our parks and cemetery labor positions at step 3 this year. We didn't get any more traction as we've had in years past. So just so you guys are aware, in 2023, we had a 12% adjustment, and in 2024, we had a 10% adjustment, and they added step 7 and 8 to the pool. So I do have a spreadsheet I wanted to show you guys, so we could talk about it. Comparing. So there's your current pay. Let me see if I can zoom in just a tad more. So the orange, the upper table, is your current structure. And then down in blue is kind of where that increases depending on the percentage change. So I can modify this, and if I moved 25%, that would be your starting wages. So as you can see on a PO3, that moves the lifeguard from $12.30 to $15.38. That's going to be a struggle, but I do need to find a way to pay my laborers that are mowing all day, every day more to make this work. But I do think we need to make a drastic change. 10% at a time is not cutting it to entice a new worker.
And Councilman Paulson has a question.
Is it possible to switch the mowers to a separate category and not include that with lifeguards?
We could discuss a different pay structure.
Because if it's too expensive to do it for all the lifeguards, but they enjoy it, if you could separate the mowers.
We could look to separate recreation and parks and cemetery.
Potentially.
Yeah, we could make some adjustments with HR's help to tweak on this a little bit. It doesn't change the fact that we do need to increase wages at least. You know, my recreation folks on the whole, I know I talked with team sports and I've talked with outdoor rec as well. They struggle to find good help without some increases as well. But I do know that on the pool perspective, that to me, I think we're pretty close, even with a marginal raise, to still equip the aquatics complex.
Another question here.
Hi, Ann. So specifically, what can the council do to help you?
I think we need to take a drastic change to increase the buckets of money in parks and at the cemetery for the laborers' positions. I'd like to see a reasonable increase on the recreation side, just to keep with trend to make sure we can find staff, but we need to do something drastic in parks, and to me that's 20-25%.
So would that do the trick if you increase things by 25%?
I hope so. I've got to entice someone to leave their job in the spring. But if you think about it, and they're making, let's say they make $14 an hour, and we can pay them to $16 an hour, I think there will be some people out there that at least go, you know what, I'll take that for 5 or 6 months and see if it works out. Right now, we're not enticing anyone. Even the people that apply at the hiring fair and some of the other things are standing us up on an interview when they find out the hourly wage.
Councilman Mangum.
I want to go back to slides 5 and 6. I think it's 5. I don't know. Percy, let's talk Percy. And that challenge there. So it backs us down from the 8 to the 6 months, which is difficult. How could we, so if we were to speak with the legislature, could we, and we were to, if they were to somehow make some kind of adjustment in there, do you see that being a benefit?
It's not Percy, it's the Affordable Care Act that shifted, that really restricted us. Now that does change a little bit with legislation and who's in office, but it's been in place since 2016 and we haven't seen dramatic shifts in it yet. And granted, there's good reason for both of these rules, it just doesn't fit any longer for this type of work.
Okay. So, now my other question is on those hybrids. When we approved that, I think that was a fantastic thing. And it's proven to be really effective. Could you stand to, and I guess this is a question for you and Tom, but could we stand to do more hybrid positions that would assist in both of those departments, or even water or another department?
I think there's potential there, but I do know, not speaking for Tom, but I do know that the street department, he's probably behind me and I don't know it.
I think he
Okay.
left the room.
You knew I was going to ask this
The
question.
street department does have some budget concerns this year with cuts that, funding that they've been receiving, so I'm not sure if they'll be able to do that again. It works because in the street department, they plow snow in the winter and then they come our direction when we need them most. I'm willing to do that, I just don't know at what point it benefits the other side.
And what, like salary-wise, I just don't know if that's like an actual savings or if that costs more to have those hybrids, because we're not paying them the the lifeguard wage. So,
But hybrids are a full-time position with
Right.
benefits.
That's-
They're costing the same as the rest of my full-time crew. And we pay for 2 and then end up with 4 during the heavy season.
right,
Yep.
might be something to look at.
Yeah, Councilman Bates.
Looking at the list of seasonal tasks, I think slide 9, I think it is wise for us and it's needed for us to look at raising this, the rate, the 25% increase you're talking about. And I agree with Councilmember Paulson that if we're gonna do that, we can't raise the lifeguards, like 50 employees going from 12 to 15, makes no sense. So I think we have to combine with this, putting out RFQs and at least seeing what bids we can get on the mowing, some of the maintenance, the irrigation pieces, and because part of it, and you've spoken to this, we could raise this rate, but we're still competing for people.
Yep.
And there's a chance that we don't increase the number of seasonal employees that we need. Whereas if we go with an RFQ and get a contractor to commit to the work, there is the benefit of knowing it has to be done because we've signed a contract. And I think for us to really know what direction to go, we have to at least get those RFQs out there and see what that cost would be and compare that with raising this salary increase.
I'd like to see, even if it was chemical application, something we could specifically separate, because we're gonna probably have to run mowers also if we go out to bid for more lawn mowing work, but we could separate that entirely. We could get a cost per acre, figure that out in addition to the raises for the seasonals and see if that's enough to curb it. I mean, I can bring you guys ideas of things that are very separated. Because I know, I mean, it's easily, you could have one or two guys running chemicals all spring long and we'd still be behind. So if we just said, you know what, hey, we're gonna outsource the cemetery, you do the chemical application here and here, and start picking off parks, we could easily, that's fairly easy to manage as well.
Have we ever solicited bids for mowing?
I have found a little bit of information from previous directors, but it's been a really, really long time since they outsourced that or got quotes for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be very interested in at least seeing what response we get.
I would too.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilman Nichols.
So regarding outsourcing, have you explored outsourcing like by project, like the cemetery as a whole?
The entire thing?
The whole thing, yeah, everything relative to the maintenance and landscaping of it?
No, I have not. We could probably outsource pieces of it, but I don't know. I mean, if you outsource all maintenance of the cemetery, then you're pretty much outsourcing the cemetery all, you know what I mean, top to bottom. Then you just really need administration. But we could look at it.
I'm sorry, Ann just had a question for a while.
Go ahead.
And so, first of all, what a complex issue to tease apart here and prepare. So impressed with all of your work that you've done to try to make this clear. It sounds to me like we've talked about a lot of different ways to fix this. I have a couple of questions about solving the ACA problem. Does that 25% that you're requesting, would that cover the ACA costs and allow you to hire an 8-month person like you'd prefer? Or no? No, that's what I thought, okay.
We'd have to pay insurance benefits to allow
Okay,
someone
so
to
that
work past that.
25% number doesn't solve the ACA problem.
No, it only would impact their direct hourly wage.
Gotcha. One of the things that you talked about was the maintenance of property that we own that is sort of small or otherwise really not very useful. Has there ever been an inventory of that property and the consideration of selling it and using some of the money from that property to fund this?
There is I know Councilman Bates has this map. There is a map with all city properties on it.
Yeah.
That issue is way bigger than just the Parks Department because all departments have an impact. Every subdivision plat that you guys accept will have a portion of it or a piece all of a sudden that is now city property. There's right-of-way pieces that potentially, and Street does a great job trying to help cover some of those spots, but there's lots of departments all picking off properties for different purposes that I don't even have an answer to, or maybe those people are gone and now we're just left with this small parcel I don't know what to do with. But I know I take the call when code enforcement calls and says, please help us. So I would I mean, that's a big topic.
I do think that bigger issue, yeah, like a broader, I think it's worthy of looking into. I agree, it needs to go well above and beyond just Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great idea to just take that inventory and see what our needs are.
Yeah, which department would do that? Would it be a task force that would need to come together to look at that inventory, value it, vet it, to see who's using it for what, if anything?
Yeah.
Well, Nico in GIS has created, and I can share it. I have a map that he's gone through every lot that the city owns. And so he's got already, I think most of that work's already kind of done. He has all the inventory of city-owned property.
I guess what my question would be, with that city-owned property, why do we own it? What is it used for? What are responsibilities with it? Does that information connect to it at this point?
That would probably be the next step.
So there are a lot of pieces of land out there and pieces of property out there that the city does own, but there are leases that have been enacted for 50, 60 years, and we don't know who signed the lease, where the lease is, why we leased it, when we leased it. And as the planning department stumbles across these, they're finding new leases and new documents all the time, and without rhyme or reason. So it's a bigger deal than just finding it on the map, but really finding the purpose for why it is as it is. It's a heavy lift.
Okay.
It seems like that is an important project for us to undertake. Is that something that we would have to hire a consultant to do? Is that something we could do in-house? What's the,
I think for starters, I could get the department heads together and we get that map from GIS and we just start talking about that. That I don't know the last time we had a real collective discussion, because there are so many hands and there's streets and
Yeah,
parks and rec, that I can certainly take that up administratively and get the proper department heads together and get the map and start a conversation. I don't know if we'd need a consultant yet for that, but we can consider that.
great.
Mayor, just one other question. I know, Ann, we've talked in the past, another challenge that we have that we haven't talked too much today about is there is a little bit of a skill issues with our seasonal employees, especially when it comes to irrigation, correct?
Correct. We do have an irrigation assistant position in our seasonal. Good irrigation guys really are closer to $20 or $25 an hour. We struggle to retain those guys as full-time staff. But it's something I think we can manage it if we can increase seasonal pay. I think we could probably get some realistic technicians there.
Okay, yeah, just to me, that's another reason to look at an RFQ of, if we have a sprinkler company that we're outsourcing to, we know they have the ability to do it and it will get done, so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask a newbie question, but I'm assuming correctly that all the conversations that we're having now would not apply to this season. We couldn't apply to any, it would be next season where we would apply this.
Correct. It would
Okay.
be for the FY27 budget.
So there's nothing like in the short term, and that we could try that doesn't involve going over budget and.
No, we're 2 weeks away from having the kids out of school, and we're getting by. But like I said, the reaction is just not what we all want it to be, and that's gonna take enticing some other employees to come to work.
Yeah, have we thought about part-time, just like part-time 12 months of the year, and then there's the lesser benefits doing something like that, just have a number of part-time permanent staff?
Variable, yes, we could do that. It would increase that pool of money to have somebody 20 hours a week. We do have some staff that would be, seasonal staff that would be interested in that.
And maybe there's another department, whether it be streets or whatever, that it could be that hybrid approach again, but make it part-time so your benefit load isn't so high.
Yeah, I don't know if any of those departments carry part-time staff at all, but
Yeah. Okay, yes.
So the kids are just getting out of school and all that, but where are you at now with the shortfall of staffing or expected shortfall?
when that first complaint came in early April, we would have preferred to be staffed at about 20, and we had maybe 5 or 6. We are getting closer to that 20 mark right now, but we have been drastically hiring for the school let out. So I think we're doing fairly well for the June staffing, but still a little bit behind. I mean, we're not getting things mowed once a week like we wanted. Initially, it was probably every 3rd or 4th week it was getting mowed, and now it's probably every other week or so.
All right, any other questions or feedback?
I was just gonna
Yes.
say, when those things, your brochures came out, I went randomly and asked some of the teenage boys and girls, like, hey, does this motivate you? What do you see here? Because a lot of them do have a job already or looking for jobs, and they're like, well, if we're getting paid that, I don't, not having to do, manual labor and going here for next, $2 less, it was like, yeah, I'd rather do that. And so I see what you're saying. There's no motivation. If it was a little bit more, they'd be like, oh, that's hard to give up. I'll go do that. So I do see a problem there.
Well, and if you think about it, when you mow your own lawn or a kid mows your lawn, right, you pay 40 or 50 bucks, or it takes you a couple hours. It's different taking a couple hours to mow your lawn as in doing it every day for 8 hours a day, all summer long in the hot temperatures. It's hard because they can go hang out at the soda barn and work, or they can go to other locations where they're inside the AC, even McDonald's, and make more per hour and have less strenuous work.
And if I can add, there's questions around, should we extend it beyond that 6 or 8 month period? And you look at the people that we would hire typically aren't going to typically be real invested in getting Percy investing over 5 years, or may even be interested in insurance, right? If they're at that age, hopefully they're covered by a parent plan or whatever they're on. So, but as part of balancing a budget, they'll still have to be factored in, if I'm right, why we're balancing those out. So it may not be a true spend, but it'd have to be a budget item we would have to include still. So is it likely to spend the comp and ben on, or the benefits on those? No, but it'd have to be in the budget. It'd be planned that way.
Yeah.
So we gotta keep to that 6 month time frame for those seasonal employees.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm really glad we had this discussion today. I think we're even more really aware of the problem, but it is true if we want good curb appeal, and parks are extremely important to the citizens, just all the feedback that we get. It definitely, I think we need to move forward with some sort of solution. We can't keep doing it this way. Okay, thank you.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, agenda item 7 is proposed changes. Yes, sorry. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm hearing time for a break. Let's take a 10-minute break. And so we'll reconvene at 10:35. We're going to move into item number 7, and that's proposed changes to city code regarding animal licensing. Animal services representatives will be in attendance to present information and seek feedback from the council regarding proposed budget changes to animal licensing ordinances. The proposed changes would address the following: A, year-round animal licensing; B, ordinance enforcement in the field and remove enforcement from the animal shelter; and C, establishment of animal welfare funding through licensing fees received. Okay, welcome, Liam.
Good morning. I'm Liam Hughes. I'm your Animal Services Manager for the City of Pocatello. Thank you for having me. As the mayor just said, that we are looking to make basically 3 changes to our animal licensing ordinances. The first is going to be year-round licensing. So instead of having a deadline of everybody having to rush to the shelter or the licensing point to come license their dogs in May and June, we spread it out. So if you move into the city in September and you license September, your license will be due next September. So that should make it a lot easier for everybody for accounting purposes, and also for licensing your dog and remembering when to license your dog. Second, we have an ordinance on the books where basically we charge people fees for having unlicensed dogs when they come to the shelter. But over the past 3 years, we've charged somebody $10. So we are not taking in any funds from that account, and all enforcement of licensing isn't being handled by the appropriate department, where code enforcement officers are far more able to enforce this when they encounter this situation out in the field. So we want to create offenses for that. If the officers find that issue in the field, they can address that and remove that, because also a lot of the enforcement issues, I have an 18-year-old work study student at my front desk trying to deal with a hostile person that, doesn't want to pay any fines or fees, it gets far more difficult. So we're trying to make sure that the enforcement is done by the enforcement officers. Lastly, we want to create this animal welfare fund to basically take some of this funding that we use for the dog license and the cat licensing and put that back into the community for microchip clinics, vaccine clinics that we can do throughout the year. Our next clinic that we're doing, we usually traditionally do one, is going to be June 6th. So I'm going to be tracking how much it costs for our veterinarian, how much it costs for our vet tech, how much it costs for the different vaccines. Try to put together a price point so that way we can hold at least 4 of these clinics a year using the funding generated by dog licensing. Currently, dog licensing in the city of Pocatello compliance is about 8%. So we have a long way that we can grow. And a lot of people, when they see that we have an animal welfare fund that is basically geared up using the funds for licensing to go back to the animals, they're more apt to license their dogs and be more agreeable to basically help the other animals in the community.
Okay. Great. Questions? Yes.
I didn't quite follow you on your second item. Could you go through that again, please?
About the offenses?
Yes.
So, basically, we have on city ordinances that if you do not license your dog and the dog is brought to the animal shelter, we are supposed to charge you an unlicensed dog fee, which over the past 3 years has only generated $10, according to the financial statements that I've received. So what we're basically asking to do, because we license the dogs at the shelter, so we mostly, instead of charging them a fee, will automatically license the dog. But the ordinance is not being enforced for licensing the dog. As I read the ordinance, there's no mechanism in there for enforcement officers to enforce in the field. So if they have an issue where they come across somebody that is unlicensed, they refuse to license the dog, they're not being compliant to the ordinances, this gives the officers the ability to address that in the field instead of waiting to try to come up to the shelter to get it addressed there, where we will most likely have the dog a license out before it leaves the shelter.
And addressed in the field, how?
Well, a lot of times I'm a big proponent of, trying to get compliance without enforcement. So education is usually the first step. And again, the compliance officers can talk more about that. But part of the next topic is making sure that we have options for them to license the dog easily. So that's kind of going to be the carrot, and this would be the stick. So this way, if the person is non-compliant, they did not follow the orders, the officers can then just use their discretion to decide whether or not they want to issue an infraction for this violation. And we're looking at creating three levels of it, of first, second, and then a misdemeanor charge. So this way, if the people that are just flat out refusing to comply, there's different levels they can go up to before they hit the misdemeanor charge.
Got to understand. Thank you.
Liam, on the difference between issuing those citations at the animal shelter versus out in the field, what's going to be different there? I mean, what's the motivation, and why aren't they being forced at the animal shelter?
We don't issue
Enforced?
infractions or citations. We just have a fee should the people come pick up the dog from the animal shelter. Again, from what I said, I've only been here for 7 months, but from what I understand, the primary focus has been trying to get the dog licensed. So if the dog's licensed, they're not going to charge them that fee for the having an unlicensed dog. But if we have the ability to address that in the field with the officers, it gives them that tool. When I was doing animal control field services, I had that option when I come across an infraction of a dog running at large, a dog being a nuisance, and a dog not having a license. I had that option that I could include any one of these fees or citations to the violator, so to try to get them into compliance. And I would work with that person while I'm in the field, say, listen, you have these 3 or 4 violations. Now you can either help me help you by fixing this right now in the field, or I can give you these citations and then you have to pay the fines or explain this to a judge of why you did not do this. So it gives more leeway. When I went through the police academy years ago, we were told that if you find a nuclear bomb in the trunk, you still write them for the broken taillight. So it gives the prosecutor something to work with.
Okay. Yes, Councilman Mangum.
I see we have some enforcement officers back here. and this might be a question for them, or maybe you, Liam, but holistically, what does this look like coming across animals that have not been licensed, or how big is this problem?
I don't have that number, but when we did the statistics for the shelter this year, we did a formula of, we estimated how many dogs were in the city compared to how many licenses were sold. And that's where we came up with the 8% compliance rate, based on that estimate of how many dogs reside within the city of Pocatello. How many that the officers respond to, I cannot answer that question. Enforcement would have to say how many they actually encounter.
Tori, is there anything you can shed on that?
I can't give you a number of how many that we encounter.
Will you come up to the table? Thank you.
I'm Tori Eldridge. I'm the ordinance supervisor for the city of Pocatello. I don't have a number of how many animals we come across that aren't licensed. Typically, if we come across people with animals that aren't licensed, we give them 2 weeks and then we follow up to make sure that they have a license, vaccinations. There's multiple things that go into it. And then we can issue them an infraction. And then if it continues, then we can go back to a nuisance code, which is a misdemeanor.
So to follow up on that, is this more, we're coming across this as it's an animal at large and then we're finding out this? Or is it just somebody calls and says, I don't think their dog is licensed?
No, it's more of animals that we come across that aren't licensed or not microchipped. And then it's addressed with the animal owner.
Okay.
Think about it like a seatbelt violation. So most of the time, seatbelt violations are given because people were pulled over for speeding.
Okay, yes.
So just looking at Part B, where it says, the owner shall be responsible for securely attaching the metallic license tag and ensuring that the dog wears the collar at all times while in public. I'm just thinking, for example, I go to Bart's Field a lot with mine. If you were driving by, are you peeping to see if there's a metallic tag and writing tickets? Okay.
No,
Yeah, just
unless there's
enforce
a
it.
complaint or we just don't have the time or the manpower to enforce all of them. If there's a complaint and we're actually addressing the owner.
I'm Ordinance Officer Woosley, so I'm in the field a lot, and part of that, the reason we have that in there is that coincides with the state code, so the state does require dogs to have collars and license on at all times, and so that's kind of why we also have to have that in our code, because we can't be less strict than what the state of Idaho.
Thank you.
Okay, yes.
Do you predict that there's going to be a positive financial impact on changing these parts of the code? Are you hoping?
I'm very much hoping that with these changes, especially with, with some of the other things that we're planning to try to get, encourage more people to license their dogs, my hope is that we can increase the compliance rate for dog licensing within the city, which would then have a positive benefit to our financials.
Okay, yes.
Did I understand you that your estimate is only 8% of the dogs are licensed?
That's correct.
So 92% are unlicensed?
That's correct. That's the estimate.
Okay, so how does that compare, amongst other communities? Are we high or low, or do you know?
It depends on the community. When I was working in the state of Maine, where our dog licensing, which was the entire state, we had closer to an 80% compliance when it came to dog licensing because of the education and enforcement that we did throughout the entire state to try to get the animals licensed.
So what do we need to do to get that number up?
It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of work. Unfortunately, Tori's department has a lot of other tasks to do, but what I'm working on the animal services side of things is basically trying to make it so there's a lot of benefits to licensing. That, these tags that we're looking at getting, hopefully they're going to be, the new company that we're looking at talking about, which is going to be the next topic, sells actually designer tags that people can buy, because a lot of people will spend a lot of money on their animals to make them unique and different from everybody else's. But we're looking at other programs that we can try to do for licensing, if we want to do reward programs like the city of Calgary did about a decade ago, where, you know, we get coupon cards for local businesses that, you know, if you first 100 people to license your dog in this time period, you can get this coupon card that, you know, goes back to these local businesses. There's different things that we're looking at trying to do where, you know, we have the enforcement and education that we're trying to do, but we're also trying to make some rewards and benefits to having the license as well. It will take time. I will be extremely pleased if we make all these changes and I get up to 15% compliance next year or in the next couple of years. So in the next 10 years, ask me that question again.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councilman Mangum.
So currently, so we're adding these three components here to help curb these offenses. For the ordinance enforcement officers currently, do you think that this would help you in your jobs, or is this kind of just a moot point?
So we do already have a current infraction we give for not having a dog license. It's a $72 infraction that we can write. Our first go-to is usually, hey, it's a verbal warning. I'm gonna check back with you in a week. I recommend getting it. And then we check back and then we can write the infraction from there. So I know we already have those infractions in place to be able to write them. And so it also gives us a little more bite. Say I'm dealing with other issues with the dog too. Okay, hey, you also don't have a dog that's licensed, which also gives me cause to, look at the dog, make sure it's good and stuff like that. So, I mean, we do have things in place. I maybe don't fully understand everything that Liam's trying to change, because like I said, we do have the infractions already in place. And if a dog is running at large multiple times, it jumps to this nuisance section of our code, which is an automatic misdemeanor if your dog is being a public nuisance.
Okay, like for me, for the change in Part B, fine, I think we need to change the code to what our current practice is, but I definitely don't see more revenue coming without education, because it sounds like you already write the citations. Sounds like the animal shelter already doesn't write citations, so to me, it looks more like a formality. It's not gonna
And we
up
have
our
more
revenue.
ability on our side to keep track of the people and their dogs, how many times so-and-so has had their dogs, has been out running at large, so we keep track of it. So
Yeah.
we know, like, it's, okay, we were out here a month ago and talked to you, now you're gonna get a citation.
Yeah, and I take it we don't write citations at the animal shelter because you aren't housed there.
No, if we do, we're usually calling the officers up there to address the issue with a person, which happens on occasion, but, usually the compliance officers are not at the shelter whenever we're dealing with some of these things. So, because again, their job is hard enough as it is.
And our citations we're writing in the field, they're criminal infractions, and so they pay that fine to the court. They're not paying it to the city of Pocatello.
True, yeah.
Mayor?
Yes.
How much is a dog license?
That's a good question. I believe currently right now,
It's just on the website, 25 and 15. if you
yeah,
spay
I
your
think
dogs.
it's like, sorry. In Pocatello, it's $25 for an unaltered dog, $15 for an altered dog. A senior unaltered dog is $18 for a senior citizen, not a senior dog. An altered dog for a senior citizen is $5, and a duplicate tag's about $1.
Okay. This may be a dumb question, and I apologize in advance. Why do we license dogs? Why do we even do this?
For the most part, it all started off years and years and years ago. I have a whole history book of dog licensing. It originally started with giving your dog rights. So very rich people could have a dog that will go out and actually you can kill your neighbor's chickens or cows or whatever like that. But if the dog was licensed, it had rights and was protected. That's back in the 1700s. Now it's been about the 1940s, it switched over to more of a rabies control issue where, a license basically guaranteed the dog was vaccinated, that we had proof of ownership of that dog, we knew where it went to, so therefore we're able to at least make sure that the spread of rabies was lessened. And again, all that started in the 1940s, the 1970s. Now, licensing now is basically more in line with how do we get the animals home. Vaccination status has been really good. Rabies is a lot less of a threat. It's still a threat, but it's still out there. But we want to make sure that we are reuniting with the animals, with the owner as quickly as possible. With some of the things that we're working on, again, the next topic we're talking about is basically how do we tie licensing and microchip together, so make sure the officers, when they find a stray or lost animal, or a member of the public finds that animal, we could get them home really quickly.
Yeah, I guess I just, I sometimes wonder if you have something where there's only 8% compliance, maybe it's not the people's fault, maybe it's the law's fault. Like, why are we requiring this?
A lot of it is just the drive. We can be a higher rate. Average of 50 to 60% is about an average in a lot of areas. When I spoke with Calgary, Canada, they had a very low rate as well too. But when they start changing their program and changing about how they look at it, instead of just a dog tax, it's actually a benefit to the community. They started to see its turn around, and now then they got up to 90% compliance just in a few years. So it takes a lot of work to get that compliance rate up, and if we can use this licensing funding for microchipping, that will help guarantee the animals get home quicker. But also, we have a lot of preventable diseases in the community that can be dealt with through vaccinations. So if we can get these vaccination clinics readily available, that hopefully will reduce the amount of sick and injured animals the officers are dealing with out there, or that are coming into the animal shelter spreading diseases in the area. So that's kind of our hope, that we want to use this license to benefit the rest of the animals in the community and make a healthier community.
All right, we have Councilman Mangum first and then Nichols. And then after that, we probably need to move on. We're getting short on time.
So I got two things. The first thing is, to Councilmember Bates's point, I feel like if it's an 8% rate, it's kind of like, just in general, why are we doing it, right? I get his point. If I have a chicken in my yard, do I gotta tag him and license him too, right? Like,
No, but you do need a permit to have that chicken in city limits.
right,
Yeah.
right. So, I don't know. Anyway, second point though. So offense number one, $50. Offense number two, $100. Why are we scratching those amounts when we're looking at trying to drive this revenue?
Again, we need to have an enforcement tool in place should there are people that do not want to comply with the law, that feel that I'm not going to pay your tax, I don't like the government, you can't tell me what to do. As when I was doing field services, I ran into a lot of that. So educating people, but having that ability to enforce it. I'm not sure what version that you got, but the version that I had, we basically scratched out any fees associated with it to whatever the fee resolution was. So how much is the?
So for the civil infraction, it's a $72 fine to not have your dog license in the city of Pocatello.
Yeah. So I'm sorry if you got an older copy, that might have been a draft. So, but the copy I had, it was just basically an infraction subject to the fine set up by the city fee resolution. So, and second of all, we can improve it. We can improve dog licensing within our community to basically make sure that, we have, because one of the other things that, we don't really draw upon, normally when we have a higher licensing rate in compliance in the city with animals, usually that means our animal owners are more educated about their responsibility of being a pet owner. So therefore, there are less violations of animals running at large, barking ordinances, violations. We tend to have a better educated populace, and the licensing numbers usually reflect that with the communities when you have higher licensing rates.
Okay, Councilman Nichols has a question.
I'm good.
You're good?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I'm feeling like there's some more systemic things we should address like separately from this. But for now, I'm hearing the concurrence, I believe, that on your 3 items, we move that forward to the city council meeting to make these ordinance changes for now. So,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. And we'll move into just item 8, and you're here again, Liam, I'm sure. DocuPet online pet licensing proposal. You're going to talk about the use of the DocuPet online service.
Yes, we started investigating when I took over 7 months ago, ways to make licensing easier. There are a few companies out there that do it, but when we investigated DocuPet, we found that they actually have a pretty good infrastructure where they produce the tags, they produce everything. They have a very good database that basically will track things, and they made it very easy for people to can go online and purchase tags. They will basically create the tags with our logo on it, city logo, and on the back of the tag, there will be a registration number for that dog license with the contact information for that person, a name and phone number. So if the animal is found at large and it does have its tag, the owner information is going to be already on there. And also on the database side, it can be tied into a microchip number as well too. So we can actually scan it, get the microchip number on our database and find out the dog is licensed. It belongs at 123 Main Street to Mrs. Jones. And Mrs. Jones went to work and the kids left the gate unlocked. So how do we get the dogs back sooner? The company itself, I spoke to a lot of other cities that use them, that they basically are relatively happy, and they did see an increase in dog licensing because all the reminders are handled by their online system. You can get text messages, email reminders, and they even mail out reminders too for people that choose not to do any text-based or email-based electronic mail. So they found that with their automatic reminders and the ease of doing it, they've been able to actually increase the dog licensing in their community relatively easy. They do not charge us anything more than just basically mailing if we are doing mailing reminders. So they'll charge us $1.50 for postage for every letter that they send out, which is pretty much on par with a lot of the postage right now. But they will handle all the tag manufacturing, mailing the tags, and they sell also upscale tags to the people. So should you want the City of Pocatello logo on it, comes standard. If you want, Idaho State University on it, you can get that. You can get your favorite football team, and that's how they make their money. So that by selling upscale items to the pet owner, they can get special ID tags for the dogs that have medical records on it. So they're offering a lot of stuff for the pet.
Mr. Mayor? All right, yes.
So will the city still issue tags, or is this exclusive?
We would have a supply of tags on hand, but since the tags are being laser etched at the manufacturer, they would be done at their warehouse, which I've been trying to encourage them that we have plenty of business space here, should they want to set up a West Coast operation. But they would basically, once the tag's registered, the tags are then created at their warehouse and then mailed to the people from there.
So let's say you have somebody that's not particularly computer savvy and just prefers to do things in person. How are they gonna do that?
Well, we still have the option that, you can come up to the shelter. We can still accept cash payments at the shelter should somebody want to do that. This system hopefully might make it a little bit easier for here at City Hall to be able to have people come in, register their tags, and accept payment here. It's one of the things we're investigating that we can hopefully go forward if we can get that payment system squared away. And we're also looking, just like we're doing the pop-up tents here at City Hall, to have more pop-up tents, for licensing, which we also will offer licensing at any of these rabies clinics that we're talking about creating. So we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to do that. And then if they are technologically savvy, we will have QR codes that the officers or anybody that's out in the field can hand people that they can scan with their phone and register that way. But we will have physical locations as well as the online option to go and license your dog.
So for the physical locations, do you still run that through DocuPet?
Yes, it's all through that same system that's go through, but we would just basically, if they're doing cash or check, we would just click on that and that would go into our normal register. DocuPet will once a month basically send us an invoice of how much money they collected. Once we all agree to what they collected, they will basically send us a check for that amount.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councilman
That was
Bacon,
my question.
you're good? Okay. All right, so are we all feeling fine of the DocuPet system, and you got more questions?
Well, is there a cost to the city? Looking through the contract, I can't figure out what it costs us.
Because we would be the first city in the state of Idaho using it, they are going to waive the usual setup fee of about $5,000. So that's usually what their cost is to set up the system. Since we're the first one to actually start talking to them, they're going to waive that fee. Most of the fees that they are collecting would be from the consumer or the person licensing their dog. Again, they're giving them the option to upsell certain things, so you don't have to get the boring tag, you can get the fancy tag. And that's where they've been finding most of their profit is. And they've been relatively well-known, growing throughout the country, so they're getting more and more cities signing on board. There's actually Idaho Falls and I believe American Falls looking at this program as well too, but we're first.
So outside of the $1.50 for the mailing, that's the only cost we would have?
They might have, service fees for the credit cards that they would pass. We could take that on, or we can pass it on to the licensee.
Okay.
Yes.
When we sell a license, minus the expenses of providing the license, where does that money go?
Goes into our general fund account.
So the more licenses we sell in the city, the more money that goes to the general fund.
Yep.
Okay, so that is in itself, I think, maybe a good argument for increasing licensing.
Mm-hmm. And, usually, and I'm very impressed by our finance department and how they track everything. It's very impressive, all the work that they're doing and that they have been doing. So, and talking to them, it's a very easy, or I want to say it's kind of easy, but for them to track things on the back end about how much money we are taking in, and that's the money that we could apply to the vaccine clinics. So, and, use towards the animals of the city.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 9, Pocatello Housing Plan Update from Planning and Development Services. The staff members will be in attendance to present and discuss the draft of the Pocatello Housing Plan and receive council feedback.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Jim Anglesey, Long Range Planner for the city. And I have also Brent McLean, Planning Director. And so I don't want to take up too much of your time. This plan has a lot of data in it. And so I'm going to provide a brief overview. And as you have questions, just please interrupt me and we'll address those. And so as for the housing plan, this is part of the comprehensive plan's vision, is to implement a housing plan. And that is found in the affordable and authentic neighborhood vision element. And just as a reminder, the comprehensive plan is this umbrella plan, and these other plans that we've been working on implementing help support that overall vision. They provide more information and more data that helps us reinforce the goals and strategies of the community's vision. So just a quick reminder of that. The premise of this housing plan, and I will say that majority of this work was done by Stantec, our consultant, who was unable to be with us today. And so any detailed questions that you have, we may need to go to the consultant to ask those, but we'll try and answer those as best we can. But the premise of this plan is that Pocatello combines the region's strongest amenities and economic anchors with a housing stock that no longer meets the growing needs of the community. And so within this, there are several drivers that kind of really paint a picture of where we're at in terms of housing, and those are really based in economic, demographic, and our current housing inventory. And so just the overarching takeaways for economic drivers is that Pocatello's unemployment remains low. Our dominant economic industry is education, medical, and government. And while this industry is stable, it does present low growth, and that's pretty apparent in our population growth between 2010 and 2020. We do have slow, steady growth.
which is positive in the planning world and maybe not so much in the economy of the city. There is a shift towards regional integration, which means that we are seeing an increase in commuters coming into the city rather than people living and working in the city. And so that's an interesting thing that's happening. And then while our dominant industry is eds, meds, and government, the thing that really plays a significant role in driving growth is manufacturing jobs. And it shows that while that's not our dominant industry, that's why we have more of a low growth than a major growth, because manufacturing is what really drives that growth. How does this impact housing market? We really are looking, really have a demand for entry-level, affordable ownership and rentals. That demand is there, but we don't really have that provided in our current stock. Again, manufacturing is what really stimulates growth, and what's needed is a mix of housing types and affordable housing for our student population and our workforce. Again, what helps bring manufacturing jobs, and how can we house that workforce? And so this means we are in need of higher density infill and multi-family development, and that will help our demand for entry level affordable units. For demographics, key takeaways: our household growth rate is at 12%. We have a young population, and the headship rate is high. And what does that mean? It means that more people are living alone, and we have smaller household sizes. And so there are more people looking for homes, but because of the small housing or household size, they're really looking for smaller units. Our income is low, and so the affordability is key. And in order to really get that affordability to where it needs to be, we need an increase in supply to allow those prices to level off. Also, 63% of population owns a home, but this rate is falling, and so we're seeing an increase in rental demand and rental properties. The impacts to the housing market, again, like what I said, the housing preference is shifting to smaller units, and we're seeing this in current developments. A lot of what we're seeing in housing development is smaller units, and so I believe that the market is responding to that demand. And affordability, and so what does this mean for us? Smaller units, higher density, and more multifamily. And people are really looking at 1 to 2 bedroom units as what they're looking for. For the housing inventory, a majority of our housing stock was built in post-war era. And so we have an aging housing stock, and a lot of what we have, even prior to that, we have one of the oldest housing stocks in the state. And so that will come into play when we get to the strategies of what that means for us in terms of the future of housing. And 62% of our housing is single family. And a lot of our other comparison communities, there is more of a diversity, and so we have a high percentage rate of single family compared to multifamily units. And then our unit production is significantly trailing. Within the plan, we have a table that shows a list of about a dozen other communities in the Intermountain West, and we're dead last in unit production. We're not even outpacing Cheyenne, Wyoming. So that's significant to know. For market indicators, our vacancy rate is really low, which also, again, plays into the rising cost of housing. Our supply is low, our demand is high, and so you see a rise in housing prices. The median rent is still pretty low compared to our other matching communities at $860, but it is rising. And a large share of the population is cost burdened. Like a previous slide said, majority of our population is low to moderate income. And so our cost burdens are high. And you see that in this little table here. This is one of the more striking tables that our median home values have skyrocketed while our median income seems to be decreasing. And so that gap is pretty shocking, and it's something that we need to really keep our eye on. The average cost of a single-family home is $335,000, and so this doesn't play well with our low-income population. Again, what does this mean? We need to increase. One of the best ways to solve this is to increase the housing supply, to increase the supply to match our demand. Housing gap, part of the plan there's a housing gap analysis, and this really shows what people are looking for. Like I had said, people are really looking for the 1 to 2 bedroom smaller units. There is a strong need for housing, rental housing, both at market rate and for our senior population, and affordable apartments. Again, remember, most of our housing stock is single family, and so finding an apartment that has amenities is what really people are looking for, and something that's smaller. We don't have many of those, but as you can see throughout the community, the construction of those are increasing. As part of this plan, we did receive initial feedback from the community, and this occurred in August through October of 25. And so I wanted to share with you some of the things, the feedback from the community. This was done through a survey that our consultant helped facilitate. And it showed that 69% of respondents said that the number one thing when they're looking for a home is a neighborhood amenity. How close it is to recreation opportunities especially was top priority. And that 2 to 1 said that that neighborhood quality is more important than the quality of their home. However, 57% said they would not or could not stretch their budget to live in a neighborhood that they want to live in. And then there was really mixed response for the preferred type of neighborhood that they want to live in, which for us means that we need to provide all the different options of living, both urban, suburban, and rural lifestyles. And then 51%, so pretty mixed, said that they prefer a walkable neighborhood with a mix of housing and close proximity to amenities and services, while the others prefer to be separated from that type. And then the two preferences for housing, access to outdoor space, like I had said, and the desire for a less expensive home, which makes sense based off of our population. And 64% said they can't afford a home they desire. 60% said they're able to afford maintenance, which is interesting because of the cost of housing. That means 40% can't afford to maintain their existing home. And then, of course, 92% prefer to own their home over renting. So what does this mean in terms of moving forward for a housing strategy? The consultant has provided a lot of different ways that we can address the situation in our housing stock and affordability. And I don't want to go into detail on all of these, but I just wanted to show you the different ways that we can address these. And they're categorized into three topics of production, preservation of existing housing, and building capacity, meaning are there ways and programs that we can train people to participate in housing development? And so that's really kind of the broad scope of what the plan shows and what it's looking to implement. We're doing a lot in planning to allow through the zoning code to allow these different types of production. And I'm sure you've seen them as we've come forward with different zoning ordinance changes, and I'm sure you'll see more in the future. But that really concludes my presentation on housing plan. I'd be happy to hear any questions or feedback the council has.
I'm sure. Yes, Councilman Mangum.
This is a great plan, and I appreciate the time and the effort that you've taken to put this together. I know it's been a lot of study and a lot of meetings and a lot of time, and so greatly appreciate it. What is the life of this plan? You know, some 10, 20, 40 years. What is the life expectancy of this plan?
We typically, for these smaller plans, we look at 10 to 20, more on the 10. So like the PROS plan and the preservation plan, they're all about 10 years. And so we expect to continue to update the data that's in this plan every 5 or 10 years and adjust as needed.
Okay, Councilwoman Swanson.
So I've got a handful here. The first one is, how does this presentation today differ or integrate with the housing study that was presented or created December 5th, 2025?
It's the same. Nothing is deviated from those presentations. And those presentations really showed, is more of an in-depth look at the data that's in this plan, as well as the strategies that I just briefly covered today.
Okay.
But there aren't any changes.
Very different presentations of the same plan?
Yep.
Okay. And then, do you know what the number of respondents was on the engagement survey?
I can look it up real quick. I don't have the number on the top of my head, though. Let's see.
Don't worry about that. You
I
can
know
get back to me.
there was quite an effort to get that going.
Just wonder,
291 responses to the survey.
okay. Is there a statistically significant judgment on that?
That's pretty close to statistically valid.
Okay. And then the last question, what, if any, do you think that short-term rental impacts have on our housing situation? Like Airbnb, Vrbo?
I think the impact is really 92% prefer to own. And so when you have short-term rentals, that takes away from the ability to own a home. Do you have any other feedback on that?
I don't think we have a huge quantity of short-term rentals in our community compared to most communities. And so I don't think it's a very large impact on the community at this point.
Okay.
And quite frankly, as a city, there's not a whole lot we can do with short-term rentals based off of legislation passed by the state. And so, but I don't see it as a huge issue for our community. It's not, the short-term rental, it's more of single-family homes being purchased by long-term rentals is more of an issue, where we have a lot of single-family homes being bought and then rented as rental units, which takes those off of the ability to purchase those homes. That's more of an issue in our community.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilman Nichols.
So what is the affordability like on the new units coming online?
I think a lot of what we're seeing is still above average, even with rentals. I mean, a lot of what I've seen is $1,100, $1,200 a month, which our average is $860. And so I think we're still seeing market rate on the high end, but they're still being bought up and people are still living in them. And so I think affordability wise, I don't really see that happening.
Yeah, it's hard because the new rental rates, they are high. They're higher than what I would consider affordable for most people in our community. And but I mean, it's a supply and demand issue still, where there aren't enough units out there to drive those rental rates down.
So you think more units in competition will drive the cost down?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Bates.
The biggest thing I'm struggling to wrap my head around, because reading through the housing plan, there's clear and obvious demand and growing demand for housing. So why, especially in Pocatello, are we seeing such a slow increase in supply to meet that demand?
I think there's several things happening. One is the capacity that we talk about. There aren't enough developments happening to keep up with the demand, and then land that's cheap enough to develop on is ever increasingly becoming scarce, and so the cost in development is high in our town.
So take for example, a lot of the development you're seeing in Chubbuck is happening because it's a lot less expensive to develop on a flat farmland than it is to develop on a hillside. We don't have very much land available that is easily developed. And so there's extra costs that go into that, hence higher rental rates, because development costs are higher. And so that is driving a lot of those costs and a lot of the development in the area. And the data actually shows a lot of people buying property outside of, or living outside of Pocatello and commuting into Pocatello, because that's where the housing is actually being built.
Yeah, one more, sure.
So where is this demand coming from? Is the population increasing correspondingly?
It's a steady increase of population, but it's, I think, a backlog of increased population that we have never kept up pace on the demand. And so we're just increasingly getting farther behind in our supply rather than keeping up with the increased demand. And so that demand, I mean, if you look regionally, our growth regionally is quite a bit more than what Pocatello itself is growing. And so, but we're still the economic center for the region. And so people are commuting into Pocatello for jobs, for other purposes. And so there's a demand for it, but they're having to live outside of the city.
All right, thank you.
Part of that data too is that it's showing the higher headship rates for each household.
Yes.
And so one of the factors is that the household sizes are shrinking. So people are essentially moving out of their families' homes and living in their homes, or alone or in a smaller household size. And so we see that in migration, but also people living here, they're living in individual homes. And so that's a big contributing factor as well.
That's a great point, because our single household, like one individual household rate is significantly higher than any city in this region. Which, being a university town, you would think that, but still, it is significantly higher, that you have a lot of people who are living by themselves, and that one person takes up the same space as a family of four.
And in particular, I see seniors, it seems like they're the most frequent population.
There is
with
an
that.
increase in our senior population as well. We are attracting a lot of retirees as well, and so you're having maybe one or two member households moving into the city as well.
Okay, sure.
What are your top 3 recommendations for the council? What are the top 3 best ways that we can help with the issues that we have?
Top 3, that's a hard one.
You could pick one if you want to start there.
I think one of the biggest things that we need to look at is how to incentivize some of these housing developments that will help with our housing stock. So increasing our housing stock, our units. I think it's important that we work closely with the university. There's a lot of demand for student housing population that we need to address. That if the university took care of their own student housing more efficiently, it would help with that burden of the city's housing stock having to supply space for those students as well. But I think one of the biggest things we need to do is really look at our code. How can we simplify our code, make it clear? How do we incentivize housing as development comes in, and look at what gaps do we have? And so as we go through our Title 17 rewrite, our zoning ordinance rewrite, we're going to work extensively with this study, with the public, with the council, on how to address these housing needs.
So you most need our cooperation on code changes
Yeah,
and improving incentives.
That's going to be, as far as what cities can do is, I mean, we're the ones that regulate the housing and what can be built. And so as we look at that, we need to really be open to what options are out there. The other thing we need to do is really cater to developers. Our developers locally are producing, but we need more workforce. That's a huge bottleneck. We don't have enough workforce to even build the amount of housing we need. And so it's a real struggle.
Yes.
So I have just a couple things. When we're looking at the affordability of housing, has any of this plan taken into account like the voucher programs and things like that for like our housing authority here within town? Because they're doing a pretty good job partnering with HUD with those vouchers. So I don't know if any of that's ever been discussed or thought of, or.
Do you mean vouchers for home ownership in particular, or?
So they have multiples, right? So there is one for home ownership, which will transition them into ownership, but then they also have those ones that are for rentals. There's some for youth, and they have some for veterans also. So there's multiple different factors there. I think that helps with that affordability aspect. So that's number one. This is kind of a question if that was factored in or I did or discussed.
Yeah, we worked extensively through this process, talking with the Housing Authority, and understand that they have a need for developing those units that they can put those vouchers on. They struggle to get current landlords to be willing to participate in that program. They're actively looking at constructing new units, and we're trying to help them facilitate and make that as simple as possible to move those types of units forward.
So my other thing, it's not necessarily a question, but more of a comment that in banking, we're always lending and partnering with manufacturers and developers, and we're always doing case studies on housing and what that looks like in communities. And across America, we're noticing there are multiple studies that show that this younger generation is more drawn towards apartment living, not as a stopping point or as a passing through, but like for long-term life. They don't want to mow a lawn, they don't want to water, they don't want to landscape. They just want to find a place to call it home, somewhere I can park my butt and park my car. And so when we're talking about single-family housing, that might not be a huge desire for this next generation. So that might be something that we look at as we're talking about these different developments that are going on throughout our community.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's key that we develop a very broad housing type, because a lot of different people want different things. And not everyone wants a quarter-acre lot with a house on it. They have to maintain the yard. Not everyone wants a townhouse or an apartment building, or, I mean, so we have to make sure that we are encouraging multiple development types. And one of the things that I try to teach residents and try to get out there is that every community, every neighborhood in this community has to play a role in dealing with housing. And Pocatello is growing up, it's changing, and it's evolving, and we have to be willing to change and evolve with the needs of our community.
So one of the other things that, because we had mentioned some of these costs and why some of these costs look like they do, there are lots of areas of land that have been held historically by certain families or certain groups of people, and they do not want to come off of that land, or they're looking for top dollar to part ways with that land because it's been in the family for generations. And so that also will drive that cost, along with hills and whatnot too. But we've got there's a lot of things that play a significant role in that. But
Mayor, just one last question real quick. I'm just wondering, since, you've mentioned it is more expensive for development in Pocatello, which I recognize. Looking at, our PUDs and subdivisions, and we're requiring 25% open space on a PUD, is that something we need to consider? That's 25% of the land they can't make money on.
Yeah, we're actively looking at some options based off of some of the state statute that came out in this last legislative session, and the starter home community requirements that we have to implement. How do we help encourage some of these more affordable subdivisions to be built within the city that are not only affordable but attractive and appealing? And that's something we are absolutely looking at.
Okay.
And we've been already discussing that.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, and one of the things that really resonated with me, Brent, was the Title 17 changes and incentivizing developers and looking at open space. I just feel like that's really key, that's something the city can control. We can't control inflation and other things, but if we've got good favorable codes, I'm all for that. NeighborWorks, that really helped with the Bonneville Commons development to help us spread our costs out more amongst the lots.
And that PUD requirement of open space, I think it's more important that we look at it as amenities rather than open space. And how do we because all too often we get open space and it's just a gully, right? That doesn't help our development, and it's not even that usable other than it's good to provide some of those open spaces, but it's more about what amenities are being provided with that development. Because as you increase the density, you need to have more opportunities for recreation and other amenities to provide a lifestyle.
Would you briefly explain for anyone who's listening what Title 17 covers?
Isn't that our like zoning code
Yeah,
pertaining
Title
to
17
development?
is the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and then maybe one more question, Councilwoman Satterfield. You're good? Okay, we'll need, this is very informative, and we'll
Yep.
keep looking at this document for sure. So thank you, very informative. Okay, agenda item 10 is Pocatello Urban Forest Plan, Planning and Development Services. Staff members will be in attendance to present a draft of the Pocatello Urban Forest Plan and receive council feedback. Is that you again, Jim?
It is.
Okay.
Jim Anglesey, Long Range Planner. And so we're also happy to present the draft of the Urban Forest Plan to the council. And again, I'm just going to provide an overview of this plan. There's a lot in here. And so I encourage you to go through it and see what's in here. I did bring show and tell for this one today. Our current plan is from 1995. Yeah, that's that one. And so this one is an update. This plan was paid for through the Inflation Reduction Act. And part of that grant that we received, not only did we have a consultant help us with the urban forest plan, but they helped us update the Portneuf Valley Tree Guide. And so I brought show and tell of that. This is the 1999, the first tree guide that we had. Our current one is from 2012. And then we just finished, they're in the process of printing our updated one. And so we're waiting from the printer to receive several copies of these to provide to nurseries and places that sell trees, and arborists and other professionals that work with trees. And part of that update, because of a changing climate, some trees no longer, that were in these older guides, no longer work in our valley. And so there are significant updates to the trees that are beneficial and do well in our valley in that guide.
And that's a beautiful book, by the way. That's better than the Arbor Foundation version.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's great.
So the urban forest plan, and I bring those up because that is part of this whole project. The consultant did inventory of all our city-owned trees. And within this plan, we have data of how many maples we have and how many ashes we have. And most of that's park space and downtown trees that the city maintains. And so part of that, we adopted a master list of acceptable trees, and that's in this guide. I already talked about the comp plan with the housing plan. Again, this is part of the initiative and the vision of the comprehensive plan to provide greater detail in the maintenance of our trees in town. And so within the plan, they present some of the existing conditions, which are pretty interesting to look at. And so I just wanted to briefly go over those. For tree management, our Parks and Recreation Department maintains all city-owned trees as well as the street trees in our historic district downtown, with the exception of the airport and the zoo, who maintain their own trees. Public Works maintains trees in the instances where private trees hang over the public right-of-way. And then other people that maintain trees are volunteers, tree care companies, and private property owners in the planting, maintenance, and removal of trees. In terms of our existing budget regarding tree activities, it's reported that it's significantly smaller in comparison to the national average, as well as cities similar in size in our region. Within the plan, it talks about how the total municipal budget is 4 to 6 times smaller than other communities,
The budget for tree activities is up to 97% smaller than other communities. And contracted tree services is up to 144 times smaller than other communities. And this graph on the other side is interesting because it, compared to us and the typical, it's essentially a flip in the budgeting of tree activities in those different categories. And so important to know that in terms of in caring for our urban forest. The existing standards and policies that affect trees in the city is one, the tree ordinance in chapter 12, as well as in the zoning ordinance. What we have in the zoning ordinance is new development and existing tree standards, requirements to plant a certain amount of trees and to maintain trees on properties. The recommendations are really looking at how do we care for trees that have been deferred in their maintenance, and really enforcing these standards in our landscaping. Most of our existing planning documents do touch on trees, but the plan does recommend ways that we can better integrate throughout all our plans the benefits of trees, both economically and environmentally, as well as the aesthetic and value of our neighborhoods as well. So within the plan, it's based off of this vision that we envision an urban forest that prioritizes public safety, increases community value, expands shade and comfort, and thrives through coordinated city action and community stewardship. And so these goals and themes throughout is based off of that vision. The overarching goals, we're looking at how do we reduce our deferred maintenance on an aging tree stock? How do we increase our tree canopy, especially in those areas that are most needed? And then how do we increase our diversity? And that's where this tree guide comes in, is how do we increase diversity? Well, let's plant more than just one type of tree. And this also empowers our private property owners to know what trees to plant. Because if you go to, say, a big box store, they may not have the trees that are suited for our area. And so this is really helpful in educating the public on what trees are most helpful in our community. And then establishing a proactive tree care program. I believe that Parks and Rec is doing an excellent job, and as we're doing this, they have been responsive in going out with these tree care companies to address the aging tree stock that we have. Themes within this plan are targeting policies and standards. Like we said with the housing plan, we're looking at how can we improve our zoning ordinance and the landscaping standards within our Pocatello code to improve the maintenance and care of our trees. Our program capacity, do we have the staff necessary to maintain the amount of trees and landscaping we have on city-owned property? And are we using the right trees? I know we're cutting out a lot of trees that are invasive or not helpful to our safety, the safety and aesthetics of our community. And how over a long period of time, how can our community take ownership and stewardship of the urban forest? So the strategies are broken into 3 categories: the management of trees, the trees themselves, and the players who play a role in our urban forest. I don't want to go over all of these. They're in the plan in detail. But I just wanted to show the different ways that we're addressing the urban forest in this plan. And it is comprehensive. But that does that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Yes.
I just asked the same question with this plan as how the council can support the implementation of the strategies that you've outlined here.
I think a lot of what the recommendations are showing is that there's a lot of deferred maintenance, and that maybe the capacity in budget and staff isn't there to care for the existing forest that we have.
And that would be under Parks and Rec?
Parks and Rec is currently who manages that. And so a lot of the data and tables that are in here show, again, what we're currently funding isn't sufficient to what we have. And you are all painfully aware that that's the case in a lot of topics in the city. Right. And so this just adds to that pain. But yeah, that's how we can support. We can look at our current ordinances and update those if needed. And there are recommendations in this plan of how we can address the current ordinances.
Top priority sounds like deferred maintenance, though.
Yes, absolutely.
Are these tree guide booklets, will they be available at nurseries in town or even the big box stores, so help customers when they're making that important selection?
For sure, the local nurseries are on board. We are still working on other places that sell trees, but we'd like to get them there for distribution, and they'll be available here as well. The grant covered about 7,600 copies. And so it'll also be online when we run out of printed copies.
Yeah, and even at a nursery or big box store, like having the QR code that goes to that book, you probably already thought about that.
Yeah, we'll have a sheet with the QR, and then all the guides have it on the back as well.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
So for new developments, are the tree types mandated or suggested?
Like the type of trees that you're planted?
Right.
In new development, we do require that they come from the acceptable list of trees.
Great, thank you.
And so outside of, if a property requires 12 trees to be planted, they have to come out of here. Any other additional ones can be whatever tree they want. But these are the ones that we see will do well in the valley. There's also a list of ones that are problematic that shouldn't be planted.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Quick check-in with the council. Do we need a 5-minute break? We've got 2 agenda items left is all, so we'll keep going. Okay, agenda item 11 is Safe Streets and Roads for All, implementation of grant application. Christine will be in attendance to talk about the proposal to the Department of Transportation Safe Streets and Roads Implementation Grant. The proposed project includes the renovation and upgrades to the city facility at 911 North 7th Avenue to expand police department operations. Welcome, Christine.
Hello. I don't know if it's afternoon yet, but good
It's
afternoon,
getting close.
members of the City Council. Christine Howe, Grants Manager. So I'm here to present a proposed grant application. Typically, we don't bring these to work session. You usually only see them at a regular council meeting, but where this is a very large project that we want input on, we felt it was necessary to bring it to the work session today. So just as some background, in 2022, we were awarded a Safe Streets and Roads for All planning grant. This was a DOT grant that allowed us to create Safe Streets and Roads for All action plan. And essentially what that plan does is outline goals for safety and improving our city's roadways and reducing traffic incidents so that we can achieve what's called a Vision Zero goal. And so in our plan that was adopted by this council, we have a number of goals here. And this plan also allowed us to seek funding from the DOT for implementation grants. So we did all the planning work, and then DOT had funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law for implementation grants. So FY26's implementation grants were announced by the Department of Transportation about a month and a half ago, And this is the last year of funding that they have specifically allocated for implementation grants. They may re-up that, but would need a congressional decision on that. And so we reviewed the notice of funding opportunity, and this year's implementation grants are putting a major focus on addressing post-crash care, specifically through public safety infrastructure. So upon seeing that, we looked at our Safe Streets and Roads for All plan and tried to identify a project that might align with both our goals in that plan, as well as other city goals, and meeting this public safety infrastructure nexus. And so the implementation grant is due at the end of May on the 26th. They're offering funding for projects that range from $5 million to $25 million. They do require a 20% match, and grants can be implemented over a 5-year period of performance. They're anticipating awards this November, and then you would have to have a grant agreement signed within a year of that award notice. So the period of performance will begin in November of 2027. So what we're proposing we apply for is improving our post-crash care through improved response times and dispatch center capabilities. Part of how we came up with this project was looking at council goals and some of the longer-term city council plans and projects. As we know, the police department is bursting at the seams in their space, and part of the council goals was to look at converting this building into a public safety facility and addressing a lot of those police department needs, including facility upgrades. And so it seemed like a good opportunity for us to apply for this grant to seek that infrastructure funding, which otherwise is often not offered as a grant opportunity. They're very far and few in between. And so this seemed like a good opportunity for us to try to achieve some of those goals and look at updating this space in this facility through a large grant appropriation that would cover 80% of those costs with just a 20% match. So the general project schedule for the grant, as I mentioned, it would be a 5-year period of performance beginning essentially in November of 2027. So this schedule just shows you how we would work through the permitting and approval process, then enter into design and engineering services in 2027 through 2028, and then move into construction in 2029, with the bulk of that completed over about 3 years to close out the project in October of 2032. And this is a large project. I'm going to be very upfront about that. Looking at the space and cost per square foot, we've used a $275 per square foot renovation cost, along with some other industry standards for furniture, fixture, and equipment for construction. Parking lot, we used a price per square foot of $10 per square foot, looking at 35,000 square feet, kind of limiting which parts of the parking lot we would do, and then included other construction buffers such as the Davis-Bacon wage rate, inflation we would anticipate on our federal grant, as well as contingencies. So this is about a $31.6 million project with these numbers. And as I mentioned, the grant would cover 80% up to $25 million based on the grant range. And so you'd be looking at a city match of just about $6.6 million for this project, which would take place over the 5 years. So when looking at the schedule and budget broken out over the project period of performance, we see here that our initial permitting would take place in that first year of November 2027, which would be your fiscal 2028. You'd have your engineering costs in the subsequent fiscal year 28 and 29, and then construction through fiscal 29 through fiscal 32. And so when breaking this out, the match required by the city would be approximately $250,000 in fiscal 28, about $300,000 in fiscal 29, and then you'd roughly break up about $2 million over the next 3 fiscal years to account for the match on the construction costs. So as I mentioned, the reason we're seeking this grant is in alignment with the city goals and plans. And we often use our plans, the goals, and any capital plans that folks have to seek grant funding. So as the grant division, we look for these opportunities, and then if something is available, we try to fit it in with a project. And so here's a number of the goals that help address this project. And so our comprehensive plan has a series of goals outlined here that align with this project. As I mentioned, the City Council's goals, 4 of them include this project, including the relocation and update of City Hall, enhancing and relocating to add to the police station, and then our future phases of having a joint training facility here and potential Pocatello-Chubbuck Fire Service integration, all would align with those City Council goals. And so our next steps are really to get your feedback today. We'll finalize the application, and it is scheduled to present to you all next week at the council meeting. And then if awarded, we prepare that financial planning. I don't know how many of you have toured the police side of the building or seen how the dispatch center operates. And I can go into the specifics of the grant application if needed, but this would help us achieve alignment with a lot of recommendations for public safety answering points. The PSAP allow us to continue our operations, but also expand our operations. The technologies that we're able to implement through this grant program are extremely vital to the operations over there for dispatch. And so all of the kind of data and the information we're collecting about improving post-crash care, it's critically vital to our services and operations we provide here. Upon starting on this journey, I was seeking a lot of information from the various departments, and in all those conversations, it's clear how much work we do here in Pocatello, specifically the Pocatello Police Department and dispatch, to respond to thousands of calls with very limited space and resources, and they do an excellent job. And so I think we're beyond time to invest in updating that space and expanding that space so that we can continue that service, but at a level that meets where we're trained and where our operating procedures are. Those rooms, just as an anecdote, the National Emergency Number Association, which is kind of a nonprofit association that guides dispatch services, they recommend at the good level of space for a dispatch station to be about 100 square feet. We have 5 dispatch stations in the dispatch room. That is a total of 495 square feet, and almost half of that is used for other storage, cabinet space, other monitors. So folks are operating well below the good standard. That's not even getting into the better and best standard for square footage of an office space for those dispatchers to work in. It's
Christine,
also
what was the threshold? Did you say 100 square feet?
is
Is
the
that like per
minimum
person?
for this, yes, per dispatch station,
Okay, per
recommended
station.
as the minimum. And so we have 5 dispatch stations in a room that's 495 square feet total right now.
Gotcha.
And a lot of that room is also taken up by other things. So they're crammed in there. It's a cut through for officers to come in. They're using essentially a closet as their leads training office, where they can review calls and do training. That also doubles as their storage space for supplies, their personal supplies when they come in, like their lunch or whatever they want to put in there. That's also the leads training office. So I think this grant is definitely needed, regardless of whether you want to go for the full amount. We want to be able to expand that space and address these needs. The police did their feasibility study in 2018 on their space needs. I've used kind of a more conservative projection on the officers required based on census data and growth rates. And so it's still the same numbers from that 2018 study as to if we're normalizing to census data growth rates of needing 155 total staff on the police department side within 10 years. And so that space need of that 64,000 square feet that they projected in that study is still relevant. And so I think it's This project aligns and provides us with an opportunity to get to that grant funding, but it does require the significant match, the 20% at the approximately 6.6 million. So that's a lot of why we wanted to present this today and answer any questions you might have.
Go ahead.
A couple of questions for you. Does this grant suppose vacating this building of any other city staff and converting the entire space into emergency services or police services?
As it's written now, that would be the plan. You could look at using that total cost to renovate and add onto this building, or do a phased approach. But at this time, yes, that's something the council would have to contemplate, is whether they wanted to do in that design either additions to this to keep all staff here, or move forward with moving city employees on this side to another location.
Does that,
Sorry.
I was just
But
clarifying.
it won't fund, like, if you did have to relocate and acquire another building and put the other, it does not fund that. It only funds the renovations on this facility for the construction.
Okay. And then the second question, when do we typically pay, or when would we pay our share of this grant?
You pay the 20% match as you go. So if you had, in this example of the budget, if you had within this first year the $440,000 for that NEPA and permitting, you would pay 20% of that. So each of these projected costs, you pay the 20% as you go.
Okay, thank you.
And just real quickly on the adding on to the building versus the renovation, we don't need to know that by grant submission time, do we?
No, you'd be able to, if the overall project concept was approved in budget, during the design and engineering phase, you could determine all of that. So if addition was needed, that would be an allowable expense during that time.
Okay. Councilman Nichols.
Yep. How many more square feet does the police department presently need according to this plan?
Yeah, they would need, I think the estimate, it's like 64,500 square feet total for their projected use, and this building is just about that. So they would need the entire building to meet their full capacity at that projected number of 155 total staff. If we were to phase it, you would obviously need to maybe figure out where you could add space or how much you could add based on cost. And so you would probably look at recommended programming for, say, like the dispatch services. So if we were to narrow it to just that, and then any other kind of upgrades you'd need. So those numbers would have to be figured out as you did kind of the programming and design phase.
So if they need 64,000 total, how many do they have now?
It's less than half. I'm not sure the exact number. I'd have to get that out of the feasibility.
So roughly, we'd be looking at adding 30,000 square feet or doubling the size of the police department?
Yes, I think approximately. It's. I have a 20-page grant application here with that number in there somewhere, so I can get that to you if you need it.
But roughly half of that amount.
It looks like,
presently.
yeah, right now they have 23,500 square feet.
23,000? Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes.
So Christine, this grant is centered around improving response times through upgrades to the dispatch center and capabilities. So a remodel of the women's locker room counts as part of this grant? Would projects like that that can be included?
You'd be upgrading the entire facility and having to rework all of those, so it'd be part of the total renovation, yes.
But relocating the police department is also an option with this grant, is that correct?
Yes, if you wanted to relocate into an adequate facility, you could do that. Acquisition has challenges with federal grants.
Okay.
You have to follow the Uniform Relocation Act, a number of other things. And so within the 5-year timeline, it would be quite challenging to achieve that, to build new, if you didn't already have the parcel and location identified.
But if it was on city property, that's different?
If you already owned the parcel, it would take out that acquisition timeline, that acquisition from the timeline. It would be challenging within 5 years.
Okay, and then Can you just go over again, so the match piece, the 6.5 million? You said that would be paid out over 5 years. So 2027, how much was that? I didn't see it in here, I'm sorry.
It would align with this chart here, as you're seeing, so it would be about 20% of what's indicated on the chart.
Okay.
And so in your, from November 27 to 28, it would be roughly 88,000 for match for that NEPA and permitting. For the design and the construction services from November or roughly February of 2028 through August of 2029, you'd be looking at about 473,000. I would anticipate that'd be distributed over 2 fiscal years, roughly probably a 1/3, 2/3, just based on how engineering services expenses are incurred. And then during your construction period, which would be about 34 months, so roughly 3 years, you'd have the 20% match on that, about 28.8 million, which is approximately 5.76 million. And so if we round up to 6 million, you're looking at about 2 million per fiscal year during the construction phases, which would be anticipated during fiscals 30 through 32.
Yes.
Are there any grant mandated limitations or constraints on how we can raise that money? I mean, could we, maybe this is a question for Jared, is that something we could potentially bond for? What are the options there? Since
Sure,
there's such
typical
big
limitations on a
numbers?
match is just that it cannot be matched by another federal source.
Okay.
And so you could do some in-kind match, but that's quite challenging with a construction project. And so it's likely all just general funds. And so, yeah, if those are allocated out of a reserve or through tax dollars, or if they're bonded, those are all eligible match sources.
Okay, so historically, if we had something of this size and scope, maybe you can answer this too. Where does that typically go into a capital planning budget? Do we budget for it as a capital expense and then use reserves to, how are these typically, how would we approach this?
We have to, I mean, if you're going to tap reserves,
Good.
they're sitting in.
Rich, are you able to come up?
I'm sorry. I do that all the time. The reserve, each fund has a reserve account, has a reserve balance right now. So I don't know that we would need a special one, but we would just identify which funds we would be using for this particular project. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand how rare is something like this to come up in the course of a city's history? Because is this something that is really unusual because of the scope and the amount of it? Or is this sort of, kind of typical of what we see every 2 or 3 years we're taking on something like this if we choose to? I'm just trying to understand contextually how difficult or risky it becomes to either plan for this outlay or fund the outlay. So that's what I'm just trying to get a sense of, relatively speaking, how big is this decision for the city and its budget?
It's a big one because the match is so big. The reserve balance in our general fund right now is just over $7 million, and you're talking about 6.2, was it?
6.6.
And fire and police are in the general fund. So it's, for the circumstance of the city of Pocatello, it's big.
Okay.
I think that's how you have to answer it, because generally, other cities, it might be fine to do things like this that are set up this way with matches. They come up all the time, but the numbers in this particular situation for the city of Pocatello is a big deal.
Yeah, yes, or you're finished.
I have just
Yeah,
one
yeah,
more
go ahead.
follow-on to that. So if the council approves pursuing this grant and we receive the grant, do we have any time there or is that part of the consideration process, is laying out for the council a payment plan, how we would manage this? Is that typical for a decision of this scope?
We certainly would want to do that, and you've got 5 years,
Right, okay.
right? And we would certainly want to do that, and we would work together in doing something like that, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councilman Mangum.
No, Rich said exactly what I was gonna say. These grant matches, these opportunities come up all the time, but it's just the dollar amount that's the only difference.
Yeah.
So, if I remember right, we had a fund or created a fund for grant matches. Or maybe we used ARPA funds. Was that with ARPA? But
We did use ARPA to do grant match on recent grant awards, and then within the grant division, we do have a grant match line for very small grants. The total of that line is $50,000.
Oh, okay.
Not 6.6 million, unfortunately.
Never mind.
Maybe just real quick, on the, may not have the info, Christine, but I know on the match, anything but non-federal sources, do you see in your grant writing world any opportunity there for them getting the matching funds from an area other than the city's reserve budget, reserve funds? Do you kind of just see anything out there, like even if it covers half or something, or?
Yeah, they're typically for this type of work where it is construction primarily, with the renovation. I don't see a lot of that being covered. There may be small grants for some of the equipment or other kind of ancillary expenses that we could look at. But the bulk of your cost here is on that renovation, and there's very few opportunities for that. Prior to seeing this grant notice of funding opportunity come up, one other thought we had for potential overarching kind of long-term plan for this facility was looking at some FEMA grants, which are federal grants. Those, again, you wouldn't be able to match the federal to federal. So.
Yeah, okay, yes.
So let's say we apply for the grant, we receive the grant. Do we have flexibility? Let's say we determined we needed to scale this down a little bit. Does that flexibility exist?
There could be some of that. They do prefer you try to achieve the same scope and deliverables. So there could be an opportunity to amend that slightly and potentially reduce that. It would take likely a grant amendment and some conversation with the grant entities. Things come up, there could be an emergency comes up, like a recession or a market change or something. And so it's not totally unallowable, but you typically want to at least be able to achieve things you said in your original scope. And in this case, it would have to be that improved post-crash care response. And so we would have to still maintain likely that kind of dispatch center upgrade as the crux of it, as we're proposing it here. But if that did amend or look slightly different, we'd have to work that out with the granting agency. So there's some risk there if you are to try to scale it too much down.
And it's your intent now to apply for the full $31 million project, $25 million grant, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I thought that was a good question as well. Like, before this comes to the city council, would there be a way to find out from the grant funder about amendments down the road? Because if we can't come up with all this reserve money and we want to scale down the project, that would be a good thing to know if we know in advance of the grant submittal, if that's possible. Maybe not. Maybe it kind of lessens our chances because they're like, well, are you really serious about this? It just would be good info to have in advance.
Where I've seen maybe they're more likely to shift to is like if you have to extend the term of the contract. So if you encounter an issue, but if you were just not planning to cover the match for a reason that isn't kind of an outside reason, or you couldn't based on your initial application, that likely would not be favorably looked upon. That would be an issue for sure. If we started preparing for the renovation and did the design and said we just like physically can't fit it in this space and we need to kind of reduce so that we can move it to here, that's a little different. It's not that we don't want to pay the match anymore. It's that
it's a
circumstances
circumstance that
appear
happened.
during the process. So those are more likely the types of amendments they'd approve versus us not
Okay.
having the money.
Yeah, got it.
So, 5 years, how much goes into reserves from the general fund or into the general fund side annually? Do we know approximately?
I don't have that number on the top of my head. My best guess is that there hasn't been much. The last 3 years that I've looked at, we've been tapping into reserves, not adding to.
Right.
But I would like to verify that for your question. I think it's that important that we look at it and get the actual numbers.
So is a certificate of participation an option in this?
I think that, yeah, we could talk about it, you bet. I think you can talk from A to Z of all the options, sure. That'd be like a bond, I think that was mentioned in
A
the-
bond, yeah, a bond was mentioned, yeah. Obviously, it'd be a little bit different, but
Well, sure, but a financing source,
a
you bet.
mechanism of some sort.
Okay, so Councilwoman Swanson and Bates.
Hope I'm not muddying the waters by suggesting this or making potentially more work, but since we've already floated the idea of combining our emergency services dispatch with county and/or Chubbuck or both, would it be possible to pursue that? And if we could agree on pulling those services together, inviting Chubbuck and Bannock County to pay some of that match? Or is that just too crazy?
I think this project would put the infrastructure in place to accommodate something like that, but at this time, my understanding, those conversations aren't initiated or they're not far enough along. But the idea is that what we build with this would allow for that in the future, in addition to joint training rooms and other expansion as needed. So planning for that future, but at this time, I don't see that as an option. And also, you would likely have to submit the application kind of as a joint application with those other entities as well.
But potentially, there's potentially an opportunity in the future to capitalize and pull in some income if we'd have that built. And then we could get them to participate in the.
I can't speak to the income or revenue or how that
right.
operation change would come to, would look, or what that would mean exactly for the operations, but the facility would be able to accommodate something like that is the idea behind this as well.
And maybe a off-track thought or whatever, but like on that, combining, if that were to happen in the future, I believe that would be salary savings that, that would be the form of the benefit, which is good, but I'm not sure like how you would use that as a match though. Like just my layman's kind of what I know of that consolidation idea.
Yes, where this is primarily a construction project, you're looking for that cash match on the construction.
So I recognize what an incredible opportunity this grant is and the amount of money that's available to us. This is just my thinking. When I look at where the city would be in 2030, making a $2 million payment on this grant, which would mean by 2030, general employees would have to be out of this building and in another building. So we'd be paying $600,000 a year in payments on the cost of a new city hall. So $2.6 million that the city would then have to try and find a way to budget for and pay in 2030, 2031, 2032. I just don't see how that is possible. That's not to say I'm against this grant. I just think maybe a different option is to look at taking emergency services out of this building and building a new emergency services location, leaving City Hall where it's at. So we're not adding the payments of a new City Hall, and we're just sticking with the cost of this grant. I think that's an option we should at least look at. But with all of the spending that we're looking at putting the city into over the next 5 years, I just don't see how this is possible. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yes.
Okay, so let's say it gets to November of 2029. Let's say 0 people up here right now are in office. Well, I guess it'd be January of next year, but you know what I mean. If that next group of people wanted to stop, is the previous just a sunk cost, and then we just don't do the 20 whatever million that next time? We don't get that remainder funds, or we don't have to pay it? Does that make sense?
No, typically you'd be in violation of your grant agreement and would have to pay back the funds, the grant funds you received, and then deobligate the remaining funds.
And then, when did you say we would know about the grant? When would we have to sign a grant agreement?
They anticipate awards in November of this year, and then you have a year to, what they call, negotiate that grant agreement, which is a lot of federal terms and conditions, milestone setting type of thing. So they would give you a year to negotiate that, and that would be signed.
Okay.
Anticipated November of
Because
2027.
just thinking out loud on that, and I don't want to like jeopardize like future grant opportunities, but there's a lot here, you know, because this has implications with the city hall move and everything, and it's going way beyond like a police department renovation grant. Just like submitting the grant, and then, you know, we can still work through our other big picture issues there, and not, you know, if we decide to bail out on some of the, you know, we don't do city hall relocation, we just decide to bail out. Do I understand we have about 1.5 years before we can actually have to sign a grant agreement? I mean, you write the grant, and I don't want it to be like a waste of everyone's time, but a lot can change within 1.5 years, and we'll have that city hall feasibility study completed. So we'll have a little bit more info 1 year from now, and I just, like, one option seems like we just don't sign the grant agreement and go forward. Is that possible?
That could be an option. It obviously would kind of affect the city's status for future applications. They
That's
would
the
likely
downside.
elevate us to sort of like a high risk for future ones. But it's certainly, yeah, you could always reject the grant award and not sign that grant agreement.
Yeah.
So we're just discussing whether to apply for the grant or not, correct?
Yes.
In your estimation, but you being you, it's probably likely, but how likely do you think we would be to get this awarded?
So we did look at, and that was part of our consideration if we wanted to even kind of go after the specific funding source. Let me see if I have my notes here. So they're anticipating between 40 and 70 awards, and they do not award the majority to a single state. So if you had, say, 20 applications from California, they couldn't award a certain number of those. So typically they do award at least one to each state, with maybe a few states not getting awards and some getting multiple. So with that math, we felt that an award to the state of Idaho would be likely. And there's only a handful of other communities and counties that have Safe Streets and Roads for All action plans, because that's also a prerequisite, is to have an approved action plan. So we feel like our likelihood of being competitive as an Idaho applicant is relatively high. It's just, this is on the far end of the grant ask. It's the full 25 million they're offering. And so with that, it makes it less competitive, but they did a number of awards for these implementation grants specifically for dispatch center upgrades in the previous year. So we think that is a type of project that they like, specifically where they called up public safety infrastructure. So we think that the project type is pretty competitive, but it is on that high-end range of the awards. So I'd like to say 50-50, but it's probably more like 20-80 or even a little bit lower likelihood. It's a huge grant ask. So.
Yes.
How often do these kinds of opportunities come through?
This is a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was like historically known as the $1 trillion Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that had never historically been done. Every congressional presidential office comes in and does something historical that's never been done before, so I don't know if it will come up again. This is the last year of this program. Congress is usually favorable to transportation funding, but this is unique in that it's transportation funding for public safety infrastructure, which is why it's kind of like risen to the top. So I'm not sure the likelihood of that type of grant coming up again. As I mentioned, the FEMA grant for Joint Emergency Operations Centers is one that is recurring, but FEMA has been kind of also had some questionable funding from Congress. So this amount of, 25 million, so covering 80% of your project cost, I don't know of other grants like this. States may appropriate through legislation types of facility funds that are usually 50-50 matches. Idaho's not necessarily been inclined to create those types of funds. Okay. So you're looking at other creative financing mechanisms to achieve these types of construction projects, whether that's bond or the COPs or just funding it.
So it's fair to say this is a little bit of a unicorn.
I would say so,
Okay.
yes.
Thanks.
Okay, so is the feeling we move this to council meeting and have the final, move this forward to not approving anything today, of course, but is that the direction the council would like to head?
I think so. I think it's going to be important for that presentation to have some clear discussion or options as to how we might potentially pay for all this. That's going to make a big difference, I think.
Yeah, because I thought, although I know we need all of the upgrades we can get in 80%, like almost once in a lifetime, but I wonder if we could an option would be to scale down the grant in half or something and get the police over here, make the dispatch area upgrades, but not have that big risk that you have to come up with $2 million of match for the 3 years straight, maybe a lesser amount. I'm kind of torn a little bit. I want like the kind of like what gets us in the best spot, but would be less dangerous, to maybe there's an option B that's a lower amount that would subsequently be less match for us.
Yes, and a lot of that construction number is based off of the square footage of this existing building. So if you renovated it just to upgrade dispatch and say reallocated some of the dead space in the city hall side, you could ask your architect or engineer, designer to consider how to do that while maintaining current city staff, for example. Because that number is calculated based on renovating this entire building. So the HVAC system, whatever else is needed as a result of upgrading your dispatch.
Yeah.
I don't envision we could use this grant to build a new police station, because that would be a little bit beyond the scope of the post-crash care for, say, the dispatch center upgrades. And again, it would be quite risky with the timeline. I don't think you could do it within the 5 years. But if you got your design and programming appropriate, it would at least get you improved on that side in a lot of ways, with the trickle down of needing to renovate the whole building as a result. Because right now their radio room is a back area accessible in the parking lot. Only you have to go outside to get in there. It's built with like OSB, plywood, and there's a mini split in there to keep it cool. Yeah. And so we don't even have our own HVAC system able to keep the radio room cool enough as needed. And if that mini split goes out, then you know, there's an issue, an alarm goes off, thankfully, but your radios now are in jeopardy. So there's issues that you could fix, and would likely still need that full number for the renovation of a 64,000 square foot building at that 275 per square foot estimate.
Because, I just wondered if we can, there's certain things we can dumb down and go lower on the cost, because it's like the big elephant in the room is if we do this, we're getting a new city hall. Like, we haven't even like finished that feasibility study yet. So that's just why I put it out there, like, do what gets us a really great dispatch center. But I'm just a little bit nervous to tell my constituents that, well, you know, we kind of like, we're going for this grant, we can't turn it down, we'll have egg on our face. And by the way, we kind of sort of decided today we're moving City Hall. I'm a little worried about that.
And I think just based on the kind of cost breakdown here, whether you move the city hall or just figure out a way to renovate,
what you
and
have.
work with this space, maybe it also contemplates an addition on the building of some kind. Because if you don't want to move city hall, that I think you still need the full 31.6 for achieving the goals of the dispatch center.
Okay.
So Mayor, that's a question I have. So a lot of what you're talking about doing with this grant is possible because dispatch is remaining in this building, right?
Yes.
If we were to, just a hypothetical, take the liquor store, which we own, and turn that area or something into a dispatch center, then you can't use this grant on anything here in this building.
I think you could include probably like the renovations and things to move that out and move that in.
But
it'd be a little bit hard to stretch everything. Whereas if you're fully, and I think, you know, there's been like early plans kind of discussed where you move dispatch exactly into the configuration of this building. So that's what creates kind of, all right, we need a wholesale renovation here.
Yeah.
If you were just to renovate the 23,500 square foot side and move dispatch out, then that could be contemplated on I could see that as part of the scope and eligible. You likely wouldn't be able to do anything about adding windows like on that side, for example. So.
Or like an addition to this building, which still allows you to use possibly this full grant amount.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you
No,
have something?
he just asked my question.
There has to be a nexus to the scope. Is kind of the best way to think of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes.
I would like to see this presented at council meeting, but I'd also like us to discuss funding mechanisms as we move forward and as it's presented. That's where I stand on this agenda item.
Okay. Okay, with that, we will move on.
Great.
Thank you for all your hard work, Christine.
I'm the next item as well, so I'll stay up
here
here.
we go
And I
again.
believe.
Okay, so agenda item 12 is the NeighborWorks Pocatello Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Proposal. City staff members and NeighborWorks Pocatello staff member will be in attendance to present a proposal for a low-income housing tax credit development opportunity for city council consideration.
All right. It's definitely afternoon now, so.
Oh, yes.
Still Christine Howe, the grants manager. Shauna, do you want
I'm Shauna Engen, the CFO with NeighborWorks Pocatello.
So today we're going to present a low-income housing tax credit proposal. And so just as some background, NeighborWorks Pocatello applied for community development block grant funding for our program year 26, which is our current year. They were seeking some community support funding for their application, for their low-income housing tax credit application, which helps them achieve points on that application to be more competitive and receive that tax credit award. CDBG funding was very limited this year, and the amount that we could have been able to contribute if available was going to not really demonstrably help with the LIHTC application. And so we discussed different ways that we could possibly partner to help with that application and bolstering it so that this needed housing could be constructed and improve that application competitiveness. And so one thing that we looked into was, because in historic projects with NeighborWorks as well, we've done acquisition and infill development. So we started thinking about parcels that would be available and potentially in a two-part way, reducing their cost to acquire a property for the project, but also having it count toward those community partner points for the LIHTC application. So we thought about, could we donate a parcel for a project like this that the city owns? It was confirmed by legal that we cannot just donate a parcel, but as Councilman Mangum pointed out earlier, we do long-term leases on city-owned properties. So something like a 99-year lease would count toward that application donation, which would fulfill the community contribution category as well as reduce their acquisition costs on the project as well. And so we started talking and trying to find some city-owned parcels. And as I mentioned, the NeighborWorks came before us with CDBG in mind. We had funded a LIHTC in previous years with CDBG funding, but it was through a series of kind of working in the CFR quite strategically to do that. But this project does align with several of our goals. You folks just heard the housing study presented, and in some of those strategies, we talked about low-income housing and partnering with developers to help build some of this affordable housing. And also it aligns with our comprehensive plan under a number of goals in our authentic and affordable neighborhoods vision element. So we've identified a few parcels that were city-owned, which we'll kind of look at, but the parameters on it were this proposed project. And so, Shauna, if you want to just describe the type of development you guys are looking at applying for in constructing, that might provide some good context.
So one of the parcels that we identified was a 19-acre parcel that's off of Foothill and next to Sacagawea Park. It isn't in the qualified census tract for a LIHTC project, which means that, because if you're in a qualified census tract, you get 130% of your tax credits. But if you're not in that, you only get 100%. So we thought, well, let's see if we can find some other funding. And so we have applied for a federal, from a federal loan.
Federal Home Loan Bank.
Yeah, Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines. We just applied for it for $1.8 million towards this project. We think we're going to score at about 70 points. The last time that they did their projects, their scoring was 68.1 points. So I think we're going to be in maybe a sweet spot to be able to get that funding. This project, because it's 19 acres and we're only wanting to do a LIHTC, and that we're actually asking for a project, a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 will be this application, which will be 24 units of senior housing, and then phase 2 will be another 24 units. And then we would love to do the rest in a community land trust to do single family housing for both workforce and for 80% of low median income, depending on how we can get the funds to make that all work. We are going to be asking for a rezone of this parcel because we want to take advantage of the density that we would like to do for the parcel to be able to achieve the amount of housing that we would like to do. We are planning on doing the LIHTC proposal. It is due the 1st of August, so we would need to have the zoning finished by that time. We'll have the market studied at that time. We have a previous market study for Park Meadows 2, which is about to go. We're going to be having the ribbon cutting on June 18th, and so we'll have another 24 units that'll be going into production then. But the housing study, when we did that one, was saying that we had 670 units that we were short of senior housing or affordable senior housing. And so Obviously, 24 more units is not gonna really put a big dent in that, but it's something that we can start with now. And then the other reason we were wanting to do 24 units was we get more points with the Federal Home Loan Bank for having 24 units or less, but also because we can take the architecture design of the existing one that we have, that Park Meadows 2, and we'll be able to save some of those architecture costs because we've already developed that design. And so it'll be a cost savings for us.
But Park Meadows 2 is on South Fifth.
Yes.
If you don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's right next to Park Meadows 1 on South Fifth, yeah. But it's the 24 unit one, and we're hoping to be able to have that same design, and so we would be able to have some savings for that.
And so after kind of seeing this concept, we did, and this is kind of a very preliminary concept that NeighborWorks provided to show the phase 1 and phase 2 developments on that lot with those acres. We did look around at all available city parcels. I think the map about city-owned parcels was brought up earlier. And we even we had GIS also identify some other public partners who had parcels, such as ISU or Bannock County or ITD, and to see if there was anything that might have been a way for NeighborWorks to partner as an available lot. We went through a handful of city parcels, both in that qualified census tract. A lot of it was over by the zoo and Ross Park area that are used by Parks and Recreation or as open space, so those weren't exactly viable. But this lot on Foothill Boulevard, which we did a little research on, was previously an ITD lot, is city-owned, and there are, as Shauna mentioned, the zoning is residential medium density, and so they would want to do a zoning change to make that high density to fit the three-story 24-plex units. And the idea would be to sort of subdivide this or divide this into just the portion that they need for those developments, and then have the remaining parcel still city-owned, which could be used in the future as a housing land trust for future development if that was desired by the city council. And so this map also just shows the flood zone, so you can see there's a stormwater retention area, flood area, kind of on that eastern portion of the parcel, but they could construct west of that and still be well within their needs for the development. So this would go through, as Shauna said, we would get the appraisal of the property for the fair market value and then go through our typical planning and zoning process, with the idea that if it is viable and can move forward, would come before the city for both that rezone and plat approval, along with a long-term lease, the 99-year lease option, to hopefully make that work for their LIHTC application due in August, and demonstrate to Federal Home Loan Bank that that's also moving forward for their consideration of their application. So we wanted to present this to council to see if this is a favorable project that you'd like to move forward. And if so, then we'll continue to work with NeighborWorks to go through the process to bring this before you for consideration and approval at an anticipated July council date.
Okay, Councilman Nichols.
Hi. Can you walk me through the proposed ownership structure here? PNHS would actually own the facility, is that right, on leased ground?
Well, so the city would still own the property. It'll be a
Right.
99-year lease. We have a current partnership with Desert.
Yeah.
It's Ryan,
Yeah.
but it's Desert Ridge.
Desert
Ridge, yeah. So it is Desert. Desert Ridge that did Park Meadows 1 and Park Meadows 2. We are the nonprofit partner. So our ownership, because we're the nonprofit partner, is 51%. So we own the property, the building, 51%. However, we don't get all of the revenue from that because he runs all of it. He runs Syringa, which is our property manager. He runs all that. So we don't have any risk on that part. So we don't have all the revenue for that, but we are the nonprofit partner at 51%.
And then the private sector takes the actual tax credits.
Yes,
right?
and so the tax credits is, there's always an investor out there, and they get the tax credits for the tax credit part, and then usually it's usually, up to 15 years, they get the tax credits, and then the tax credits are.
So what happens after 15 years?
We always have a statement in the partnership agreement that we can take over the property if that's what they want to do. Ryan has said that normally he doesn't like to do that. He usually tries to keep going with partnerships and keep doing things. And so he doesn't usually sell them at that time, but he says, but we do have the first right of refusal to be able to purchase the property.
So is it possible after 15 years, the units would be converted to market since they no longer have a tax credit subsidy?
There is that possibility. A lot of times in LIHTC, they redo it because usually at that point they need to have some investment into the property to make it to refresh. I'm gonna grab some water, but I just had a bad cold. So.
Yeah, and for what I remember on that, although the tax credits are only for 10 or 15 years, the contracts I've seen that are signed, you have to keep that affordable for 30 years. Even though your tax credits are expired for your investor, it's typically 30 years that they have to stay affordable.
Yes, so you have to keep it affordable for 30 years. So you do have to maintain that piece. But like a lot of LIHTC places do is they will redo the LIHTC because they need to,
Renovated.
renovate it and and freshen it up and make it look better. So they usually do that quite often.
So I'm guessing that you're proposing a significantly below market lease on the ground, is that right? Or do we know yet?
Yes, we are doing that. According to the Federal Home Loan Bank, as long as it's $100 a year, that's considered donated as far as they're concerned, as far as a lease. But that is what we are proposing for that. And then we're also hoping, like I said, for the rest of the stuff to do a community land trust and possibly doing shared equity to be able to get people into homes, because right now that's actually for anyone 80% of below median income, that's not possible right now with the construction costs the way they are.
So what are you proposing for a lease rate for the 19 acres?
We haven't discussed that yet, but we're going to be working with that. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, yes.
Okay, might be a dumb question. If the city owns the land and leases it, and then the people who live there, whatever, the property value, does the city get any of property tax money if the city still owns the land?
Yeah, there's still property tax revenue, yes. It's not reduced or it's full property tax.
Yeah.
There's no reduction there. The city
Yeah.
still gets that money, or county or whatever.
So for a lot of LIHTCs, if they own the land, their property taxes is based on their revenue.
Yeah, and then
So
there's
that
the
would have to
community
be-
land trust side as well, like if you were to do single family homes, it's like full just market tax value for any single family dwellings that are built.
But the
And
fact
that's
that
even
we,
if the city still
but the
owns.
fact that we own the land, I don't think that we collect taxes on that.
Yeah, we'd have to look into that
Yeah.
Yeah,
question
that's
and
what,
and if
that
it's
is what
assessed
we have to
Okay,
look
I
at
see.
legal
Yeah.
to figure those
Mayor?
parts
Mr. Mayor, I
out.
might be able to give you some insight into that. I think in a leased land scenario, the land would be exempt, but the improvements would be taxed at their full value, is my guess.
Yeah,
confirm
I
that.
can't remember for sure on that part.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Usually,
move forward.
because the improvements, they will get taxed at the full improvement value.
Yeah. True. So yeah, that's still privately owned on the dwelling itself, which is the majority of the tax part anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little blurry here, so I just want to understand this. This does not cost the city anything apart from agreeing to lease this land for $1 or however much we agree to lease it for. And we don't lose any property tax income from that. Is that true?
And you also don't maintain that land anymore.
Don't maintain it anymore. Okay. So the developer collects all the rent, gets all the money from the rent, and then manages the property as well. So NeighborWorks doesn't get any income back to it through the actual renting of the
We get some.
units.
We do get revenue.
Oh,
We
you
get
do? Okay.
15% of the revenue. Even, like I said, we're a 51% owner, but we only get 15% of the revenue. But I shouldn't say revenue. It's once everything's settled out of the profit, we get 15% of the profit.
Okay.
So,
And you also get a developer fee.
and we do get a developer fee, but that's also a lot less than, because we don't do a lot of that work. But like I said, we found, because we did LIHTC a long time ago, and it ended up being a big headache for us. And so this one, when we found this developer, we actually found that it actually works pretty good for us. We don't have to manage the apartments, and we don't have to manage the property manager. And so that really kind of worked out for us a lot.
Councilman Mangum.
I look forward to seeing this at the July council meeting. And thank you for your work on this. Working with you, Sean, on the board is a delight. So thank you.
Thank you.
This is great, and it complements the housing study and the comp plan and all those other things. And so I appreciate this.
Yeah, Councilman Bates.
Not that I'll be around to care, but what happens in 99 years?
Well, when we were looking at community land trusts, a lot of time in the community land trust, what they'll do is when they have the community land trust and the person buys the home, they have the 99-year lease. But then when they sell that home, that person gets a 99-year lease. So it goes kind of in perpetuity, because a community land trust is basically, it's affordability in perpetuity. Those homes, if you're doing that model, means that they will be affordable in perpetuity, which is one of the reasons why I'm really excited about having this talk with the city and trying to make sure that we can find some housing that is actually going to be an affordable in perpetuity, that you're been able to invest what you have in that land, and you're able to say, okay, in perpetuity, now we're going to have some affordable housing that's forever. And I think that's a great thing. It's a little bit different model when you look at shared equity. But you're able to keep that housing affordable in perpetuity, and not just, it's sort of like we have Sagebrush Step, which is a land trust, and that conservation piece, that perpetuity piece is a big issue, and that's one of the things but it keeps that land not developed, because they are able to keep, ranching and farming on that land, so.
So it just renews? Because these aren't privately owned.
You'd have to likely renew it
So,
as Sean
yeah, like I
described,
said,
once
they
that
would,
lease is up.
you would renew it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of this. This is one of the key, like, when I look at a map of city property, I have no idea why we own this. Like, all around it is just, this would be developed tomorrow if we didn't own it. So something needs to happen with it. If this doesn't go through, I hope we sell it. So, yeah, I'm excited that something would happen with it.
And like for me, I'm putting on my neighbor works hat, sorry, but with the LIHTC awards, the low income housing tax credits awards, they're very competitive. And Pocatello or Bannock County went through like a 15-year dry spell of not getting any LIHTC awards, because we had the Whitman Hotel was the last one until Park Meadows, and that was like 15 years later. And the funders, when I was working a lot with Idaho Housing, they said that, you know, how these communities are getting these tax credit awards is that the municipalities are stepping forward with some incentives that they help raise the score on the application, because usually a third of the applicants in a normal year get the funding. And so I really feel like this is a way where the city is stepping up and putting skin in the game so the community can get the awards. And now we're kind of in a good string, and NeighborWorks has found a good partner developer that takes a lot of the work, but at the same time, you get them online and they're income restricted units. But I just see this as a win-win, and it fits right in with our affordable housing goals. And the LIHTC properties have very high standards. They're inspected by Idaho Housing and Finance all the time. And as Shauna said, it's like, or Christine, like 600 and something units is a shortfall. So it's just and we will get some tax revenue for the improvements there. I just feel like this is a real win-win.
All right, we will move forward with this and, yeah, bring before council as we work through these steps. So I appreciate the feedback.
Okay.
So, thank you, Shauna.
Thank you. All right, with the next agenda item, and for sake of time, we won't do our council advisory board updates. So I do see the time is 1 o'clock and we've got another budget meeting, so we are going to adjourn. Thank you, everyone.